Important update about YouTube playlists. Hey everyone. We've received many messages asking why our YouTube playlists aren't showing up. Do we create YouTube playlists? Yes, we absolutely do. So why can't you see them? Honestly, we're not sure. We've been in contact with YouTube support for several months now, but we still haven't received a clear answer or solution. After much discussion, our team has decided to take matters into our own hands. We believe the issue might be related to the number of playlists we've created on a single channel, possibly too many. Our solution? We're launching 2 additional YouTube channels, giving us a total of 3. This way, we can organize our audiobooks better and avoid the playlist visibility issue in the future. This change only affects our YouTube audience. If you're a patron supporter, you can still access all our audiobooks by visiting the collection menu on Patreon. Thanks so much for your time and continued support. Happy listening. Whitebeard sat on an oversized lounge chair placed on the deck, seemingly basking lazily in the warm sunlight. On both sides of the deck, some people were sitting or standing. Marco, Jazu, and other captains were all there, but many of them had white bandages wrapped around them and injuries on their faces. It was clear that even with their combined efforts, they hadn't gained much advantage against Kaido. However, the atmosphere in the court was incompatible with the bright weather and the colorful small island. Everyone looked preoccupied. They clearly felt that the Great Sea was undergoing incredible changes, and the situation of the entire world was developing in a strange direction. Big Mom and Kaido actually defected to the world government? Can you believe that? Such a joke, in the past, would truly have been a big joke. But now, when the facts were slapped in everyone's faces, they only felt like they had become the bewildered joke. Why was this happening? Why? This was also the question that Edward Newgate couldn't figure out. Not only Charlotte Linlin, but Golden Lion Shiki and Burned Eye World also seemed to have complied. How was this possible? Edward Newgate knew very well what kind of man Shiki was. This was a bastard who, after leaving the Rocks Pirates, would absolutely never work for anyone else. But what about those flying warships? There were simply too many things he wanted to understand, but no one gave him an explanation. However, the words Charlotte Linlin said to him left a deep impression. Will this old man know sooner or later? Edward Newgate, who was resting with his eyes closed, sighed inwardly. But no matter what, the most important thing was to protect his sons. From beginning to end, he had no ambition to become king or dominate, nor did he have much desire for treasure. All he wanted was to build a family on the sea and incidentally protect his poor and destitute hometown. That was a non-affiliated country that couldn't affiliation with the world government because it was too poor to pay the heavenly tribute. It gradually became an outlaw island where pirates and human traffickers ran rampant, and eventually the country was destroyed, leaving only a few villages. Because he cared about that place, ever since he went out to sea and became a pirate, he had been anonymously sending dirty money and supplies there. At the same time, he had the children responsible for transporting them clear out the trash doing evil on the island. Marco and the other captains had been there before, but once they became famous and attracted world attention, they were replaced by the sons who had newly joined the ship. The purpose was to avoid attracting the attention of the world government and other great pirates, lest they harm the hometown that had become quiet and peaceful. Sons and hometown were everything to Whitebeard. These were the things he cherished immensely. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Suddenly, the weather changed drastically. A strong wind swept in from the sea surface, causing the clothing and hair of everyone on the ship to flap loudly, and huge waves fiercely pounded the Moby Dick. Fortunately, the sail had been furled, but when this wind reached the island, it caused many people to exclaim in surprise. Many colorful hats were blown off, and the women quickly covered their blowing skirts. Edward Newgate suddenly opened his eyes, performed a stand-up from his chair, and looked towards a certain direction in the clear blue sky. This attracted the attention of Marco, Jazu, and the others. Old man? Marco asked in confusion. Edward Newgate gripped the Murakami standing beside him, his expression becoming serious. He ordered. Something big is coming. Tell everyone to come back. All right. Marco turned without hesitation to handle it, while the other captains on the deck became vigilant. Although their observation hockey range had not yet sensed any aura, their trust in the old man was 100%. Such strong hockey. But these people couldn't see the cold expression on the face of Whitebeard, who had his back to them, because he felt an incredibly strong aura that he had never heard of or even imagined before. Not even Rox D. Zebuk, Gul D. Roger back then, or himself now, possessed such overbearing aura. What's wrong, old man? We're back. The crewmates who had gone ashore returned one after another, but at this moment, neither Edward Newgate nor Jazu, Thatch, Vista, and the other captains paid them any mind. Instead, they stood frozen, looking up at the distant sky. This caused the crewmates who had just returned to the deck to subconsciously follow everyone's gaze. The next moment, a relatively distinct black shadow appeared in their line of sight, slowly flying towards them. A moment later, the black shadow became clearer and larger. A ship. That looks like a white ship, but it has no sails. It's a bit like those sky islands of the flying pirates back then. Rakuyo, the captain of the 7th Division, holding a meteor hammer, said, narrowing his eyes. But when the white airship got closer to the ground, suddenly, all the crewmates' expressions changed drastically, because they saw the heavenly soaring dragon's hoof emblem on the ship's hull. That's a celestial dragon ship. At this, everyone present felt their hearts sink to the bottom. Although they were known as the world's strongest pirate crew, it was impossible for them not to be wary of the celestial dragons. Because once you touch a celestial dragon, it's equivalent to declaring war on the world government, and not just a small skirmish, but a true all-out war. If it were before, they wouldn't be too worried. After all, in the New World, besides them, there was also the Big Mom pirates, and before that, the Flying Pirates. Even if the Marines were dispatched in full force, they couldn't do much. But now, only they were left. Maybe it's just passing by? Fossa, the captain of the 15th Division, who was carrying a great long saber on his shoulder, chuckled with a hint of humor, but immediately his expression darkened, because even he felt that was impossible. Is the world government coming to subjugate us? Flower Sword Vista voiced his thought. Marco asked in confusion. If that's the case, why would they send a celestial dragon? If they were truly coming to wage war against them, then according to common sense, dozens of marine warships should appear. But when the white ship was less than a kilometer away, all sounds instantly disappeared. No one was speaking anymore, and their breathing became cautious. Even the men, women, old and young on Rainbow Island behind them were dumbfounded. All the birds and beasts on the entire island dared not make the slightest sound. A deathly silence, as if even the great sea was scared into calmness. Noah's Ark, with its terrifying hull covering a full 21 square kilometers, was completely displayed before everyone. It blocked the sky, blocked the sun, casting a vast black shadow over the boundless great sea. Big, it was too big. And the dense, hundreds, nearly 1,000 large-caliber cannons, also made people tremble with fear. Dozens of warships combined didn't have such a grand presence. Is this the answer? Edward Newgate gazed at the colossus with a blank expression, thinking to himself. Chapter 287, The One Who Bears the Lives of the World. Dong, suddenly, a drum sound that resounded through the sky, great sea, and the entire island abruptly rang out. Immediately after, various musical instruments joined in, forming an extremely stirring and melodic, shocking music. The source of this sound was precisely the ridiculously large Noah's Ark at this moment. In a corner somewhere on the seemingly endless deck, a group of musicians in suits and formal attire sat on luxurious chairs, focusing intently on the conductor waving a black baton on the high platform in front of them, meticulously playing the exquisite musical instruments in front of them or in their hands. They were an entire symphony orchestra, numbering a full 120 people. They were mainly divided into the string section, woodwind section, brass section, percussion section, and color instrument section. Violins, cellos, clarinets, oboes, piccolos, flutes, trumpets, French horns, timpani, triangles, pianos, harps, and so on, everything was available. And every single one of them was a renowned musician in their respective kingdoms. Around them were placed many recording equipment, which then broadcast the sound through the large, high-volume giant loudspeakers hanging outside the ship's hull. This allowed the wrath of God they were performing to truly achieve the astonishing effect of soaring into the 9 heavens and shaking 1,000 miles, pushing the atmosphere to its peak. Boom! At the same time, a white stairway, hundreds of meters long and over 100 meters wide, was pushed out diagonally from the deck of Noah's Ark, finally crashing heavily onto the shore beach of Rainbow Island, also shaking up large amounts of sand that flew up and fell like sand waves. Immediately after, a plush carpet rolled down, quickly covering the stairway in a vibrant crimson, like a rolling red carpet. Thump 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 thump, before it had even fully unfurled, 2 teams of Holy Land garrison soldiers, clad in fine armor and holding fine steel spears, swung the wide, pure white large cloaks behind them and followed closely on either side of the stairway, as if chasing the continuously rolling red carpet. They then stood silently at the edge, emitting a sharp aura. Everyone in the Whitebeard Pirates was completely stunned. The magnificent, epic musical instruments in their ears, combined with the supergiant ship that covered the sky, felt just like a god descending to the world. But this wasn't over. With 3 loud bangs, 3 golden giants covered in blood-red patterns appeared. Holding their respective golden weapons and wearing white capes, they landed heavily from high altitude, once again shaking up surging sand waves that swept outwards. Giant race. Edward Newgate narrowed his eyes, his snowy white crescent-shaped mustache twitching. When he found that the aura of these three was not strong, he stopped paying attention to them and focused his gaze back on the terrifying aura that had not yet appeared on Noah's Ark and saw he's appeared. Edward Newgate's pupils suddenly contracted. He saw a white-clothed person appear on the deck at the very top of the stairway. When their gazes met across hundreds of meters, the former's mind felt as if it had suffered a strong impact, feeling that the entire world was filled only with golden ripples. But the other party seemed to have no malice, their gaze showing more appreciation, which made Whitebeard frown. On the other side, the white-clothed person initially walked down the red carpet stairway, but when he was still about 20 meters from the ground, he stopped walking down and instead stepped out horizontally into the air. Moonwalk. Some of the Whitebeard pirates speculated, but the stability of his posture, as if walking on plain ground, made them immediately dismiss this idea. Devil fruit ability? Finally, the white-clothed person walked through the void air to stand in front of the three golden giants, attracting everyone's gaze to himself, making the giants completely blend into the background behind him. The moment he stood still, and no one knew how he did it, the symphony orchestra 1,000 meters above immediately stopped their actions, and all the music came to an abrupt halt. For a moment, in the sky, on the sea, on the island, only the sound of surging sea waves remained. "Who are you?" Edward Newgate took a deep breath and was the first to ask with an extremely serious tone. "We meet for the first time. Are you the world's strongest man?" Im stood with his back to Noah's Ark, his back to the towering stairway, his back to the Holy Land garrison, his back to the vast great sea. Under the shadow that covered everything, he clasped his hands behind his back and looked down at the other party from a higher position. "This son is the one who bears all lives in this world, including yours." Bang 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 bang. Just as his words fell, Edward Newgate's expression changed. He found that Marco, Jazu, and others on the deck behind him suddenly knelt heavily on the ground. A caw so heavy. Everyone's body trembled violently. It was clear they were trying their best to stand up, but the air on their bodies felt like an unshakable iron mountain. They couldn't even lift their heads, only pressing them tightly to the ground. At the same time, they felt a very clear stinging sensation all over their bodies, as if pressed by countless sword sharpness. Conqueror's hockey? But that wasn't right. This strength didn't feel like a mental impact, it felt more like inexplicable gravity and sharpness. That means it's a devil fruit ability. Kneeling before your king is your highest glory. Only you, this saint grants you the qualification to stand and have an audience. Im's voice was flat, as if everything was only natural, but to Edward Newgate and the kneeling Whitebeard pirates' crewmates, it was incredibly grating. Don't put on the posture of a celestial dragon in front of this old man. Boom, Edward Newgate was enraged. Seeing his sons being so humiliated, he was truly furious. An incredibly powerful and terrifying force field aura surged forth. He controlled most of his conqueror's hockey to surge towards him like a collapsing mountain and overturning sea, while a small part attempted to sweep away the invisible strength on Marco and the others. Humphrey. An extremely arrogant cold snort exploded from Im's throat. A chilling, emotionless sword intent merged with God's domain swept out, causing palpitations. In an instant, those air currents that seemed like a tsunami were completely torn apart and dissipated within 100 meters, blowing his pure white robe like a gentle wind. How is that possible? Edward Newgate watched in shock as his sons remained kneeling on the ground. His conqueror's hockey had not had the slightest effect. This saint appreciates you. This is the capital for your willfulness. From now on, your strength shall be used by this saint. But before that, you need to deeply understand the height of the heavens. The current you is nothing but a frog in a well. Edward Newgate's expression was already ashen. He glared at him through gritted teeth. But the lives of Marco, Jazu, and others were clearly in the latter's hands. Since this person could make them kneel, he could certainly crush them directly. So he could only sneer. Gorrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrr This island is quite beautiful. Let it be here. Im glanced at the colorful Rainbow Island and made a decision in his heart. But this made Edward Newgate's expression change, and he quickly shouted. There are still thousands of civilians on this island. This old man knows there's an uninhabited island nearby. Let's go there. They should feel proud to be able to contribute to the king. As the words fell, without waiting for Im to specifically order anything, the Holy Land garrison soldiers who were originally standing on both sides of the stairway began their operation, quickly heading inland, on the island. What are you doing? Edward Newgate was completely anxious. He thought these soldiers were going to slaughter the residents here, but he couldn't directly make a move here. Hearing his thoughts, Im said indifferently. What this saint wants them to offer is their homeland, not their lives. You are overthinking. Chapter 288, Take this old man's blade. Is it because of you, Shiki, Burned Eye World, Big Mom, that they bowed down to the world government? Edward Newgate asked with a complex and heavy heart. You could say that. Soon, you will also be one of them, and before long, you will feel honored and delighted by it. Im didn't mind chatting with him for a bit. For a superior, someone like Whitebeard, who had little ambition, many bond, and immense strength, was the perfect subordinate. Gorura, I can tell you're strong, very strong, but wanting this old man to submit? The difficulty of that might be beyond your imagination. He now regarded him as a top-tier combatant among the new generation of celestial dragons. With the world government's resources and hundreds of years of foundation, it wasn't strange to cultivate a genius into a top-tier combatant. As for the somewhat exaggerated aura, it could be attributed to the opponent's exceptional talent or a certain devil fruit ability. But no matter what, Edward Newgate, who in his life had encountered Roxy Zebek, Goldie Roger, Monkey D. Garp, Golden Lion Shiki, and others, firmly believed he had a clear understanding of the world's power ceiling. Not to mention, he himself was the publicly acknowledged power ceiling spokesperson of the 4 Cs. While the strength of one's aura could be used as a reference, it was only a reference. Therefore, no matter how strong this young celestial dragons in front of him were, he couldn't be much stronger. At most, he was at a level where he could contend with him equally. Because the world's upper limit was just that. After defeating this celestial dragon's brat, I'll trade him with the world government for my son. Edward Newgate believed that with the opponent's combat power value, the world government would absolutely not give him up. This made the fighting intent in his heart grow stronger, like a fire being stoked with firewood. But Im was non-committal to his words. Continuing the conversation at this point would be meaningless. On the other side, the government official worked with the Holy Land garrison with high efficiency, quickly leading the resident out from the island. This was because they only allowed these people to bring 3 precious items with them. During this time, there were instances of chaos and arguments, but the Noah's Ark, which covered the sky, was too shocking. Coupled with the forceful methods, they could only reluctantly queue up and walk out of the village gate, which was flying the Whitebeard pirates' flag. The citizens were surprised to find that the Whitebeard pirates nearby didn't dare to move at all. The Moby Dick, with its imposing appearance, just quietly sat by the shore. After all, from their perspective, they couldn't see Marco, Jazu, and the others kneeling on the deck. But this also made everyone give up hope, and they boarded a sea ship capable of carrying 1,000 people with dejected expression. This ship was included with a Noah's Arkansas. Besides it, there were many more ships of different sizes and models, prepared for unforeseen circumstances. There were even 10 flying warships. This meant that it could instantly deploy a Buster Call-level flying fleet. Seeing that the area was mostly cleared, Im disappeared into the air instantly without any warning. Edward Newgate narrowed his eyes upon seeing this. He had the feeling that this wasn't a devil fruit ability, but pure speed. However, even so, it was significantly faster than Burned Eye World's Momo 100-fold speed. To think such a figure has emerged among the celestial dragons. With a heavy heart, he glanced at his son, who was still struggling on his knees on the deck. He could only sigh, lift his Murakamagiri, and stride towards the depths inland, on the island, of the colorful island. As he moved, he was like a savage giant beast. Each step produced a roar, crushing a patch of ground. Im, who had already stood on the tip of the tallest tree, stood with his hands behind his back, quietly looking down at Whitebeard as he ran over aggressively. To be honest, he had been looking forward to this combat for a long time. This was a rainbow eucalyptus-colored forest. Not far from the forest was the residence town, where wooden houses rose and fell, nestled against each other. The interview begins. You can fully display your value to this saint, Edward Newgate. When the latter ran to a distance of about 100 meters from him, Im spoke again. His calm voice, which wasn't particularly loud, rippled through the air like invisible waves. Something miraculous happened. No one knew how the people on the Noah's Ark heard it, but the large symphony orchestra composed of 120 musicians actually started playing again. This time, the music was Giant Fortress. A background music specifically for grand scenes. This made Edward Newgate stunned, and then he burst into loud laughter. Gorura, you really are an arrogant brat. Then this old man will grant your wish. The next moment, accompanied by the stirring combat music, accompanied by the symphony orchestra's full performance, he was seen holding Murakamagiri in his right hand, slightly turning his imposing physique. His empty left hand clenched into a fist, a sharp radiance flashed in his eyes, and a circle of white halo gathered on his fist. Without a word, he heavily punched the air facing Im's direction. Crack, a slightly dim, but sufficiently noticeable white light exploded on the flat surface, as if an invisible mirror had been shattered. Dense cracks spread outwards. But this process was very brief. In the blink of an eye, the entire glass completely shattered. Immediately, The air within the affected range became violent, transforming into a visible shockwave mixed with pale white tremor that surged out. Not bad. Im looked at the tremor attack that scraped away large areas of the ground, pulverized countless colored trees, and struck like a tsunami, a satisfied smile appearing on his expression. Boom, however, he didn't seem to make any movement. Although he was just standing on the treetop, the vast impact slowed down at a visible speed, as if it had fallen into an invisible gravity field, making every meter it approached seem so difficult. When it finally managed to reach a position less than 20 meters from him, it finally couldn't hold on and dissipated completely, leaving only the long, deep indentation to prove that it had made an effort. How is that possible? Edward Newgate's eyes widened in shock, his pupil trembling. He hadn't held back just now, that was definitely 100% strength quake. At the same time, Marco, Jazu, and the others, who had already stand up from the deck, were panting heavily. Their expression was very ugly. The next moment, they witnessed an unbelievable scene. Old Man's Quake didn't even touch the corner of the opponent's clothes. Above the Noah's Arkansas to think he is this strong. Lord Saint Narona. Stussy was also shocked by the strength Im displayed, subconsciously covering her small mouth. Although she had the feeling that this unique celestial dragon's was very strong before, everything requires a reference to have a more intuitive understanding. And the world's strongest man, Whitebeard Edward Newgate, was the best reference. At the same time, Edward Newgate bit down hard on his steel teeth, gripping the sword hilt of Murakami-gire with both hands, and began running with large strides. Each step crushed a piece of ground. After running about 20 meters, he heavily stomped and exploded the ground beneath him and the nearby trees with a bang. His 6'6" physique leaped up. "Brat, take this old man's blade." He roared, his entire body's muscle bulged, and veins popped out. A brighter white light condensed on Murakami-gire's blade. This wasn't all, streaks of dark red lightning also flashed on it. Oh. Conqueror's Hockey infusion? Im slightly tilted his head and narrowed his eyes, watching Whitebeard's furious gaze. This blade alone seemed like something his god's domain couldn't stop. In this critical moment, he was thinking whether to dodge with speed or take it head-on and see. The next second. Swish, he instantly drew the inma from his waist beneath his white clothes. Dark purple radiance quickly spread across the blade. Come to think of it, you don't have the qualifications to make me retreat either, Edward Newgate. Chapter 289, The Sword Saints Odin's Sword Slash. Boom. The pole blade cleaving vertically downwards and the saber slashing horizontally upwards collided fiercely across nearly 10 meters of void. Dazzling white light and ominous purple light intertwined amidst crisscrossing, flickering lightning. The space between the blades, squeezed by these two overly powerful forces, visibly distorted and blurred. It was like a ball about to burst, which groaned painfully with crackling roars. The trees under Im's feet had already been pulverized by the rippling energy that was unleashed. But he didn't fall, still stood steadily in the air. The scene below was even more a terrible sight. Circle after circle of rainbow eucalyptus snapped one after another under the air current. The ground of the entire island was also sinking in layers, with countless cracks spreading rapidly. The town buildings not far away kept collapsing amidst the violent shaking. The Whitebeard Jolly Roger that had sheltered this place for nearly 10 years was also buried under piles of rubble. The affected animals on the island were even more miserable. If they were instantly shaken to death by the sweep of energy, they were spared excessive suffering. But if they fell into the cracked earth, they truly died without a trace, suffering immensely. At the same time, high altitude above, the azure and tranquil sky was now churning with wind and clouds. The entire atmosphere seemed to be thrown into chaos by the tremor. Large amounts of white mist gathered, then split into two halves, left and right. As if the sky had split. And this was merely the spectacular phenomenon resulting from a single clash between two world's strongest men. So strong Edward Newgate, leaping in the air and continuously applying downward pressure to his bison toe. His mood was now unprecedentedly heavy. Even though he was the one attacking, the webbing between his thumbs and index fingers faintly ached from the tremor. That's Odin's sword. Whitebeard's pupils suddenly contracted, and he immediately recognized the identity of the saber in Im's hand. After all, it was previously Kazuki Odin's personal sword. But it was this moment of distraction that allowed the purple light from hell, like a crescent moon, flashed across the void in the blink of an eye, cutting through the cracks and sending his bisondo flying. Bang! Edward Newgate fell back to his previous position in a sorry state. At this point, there were no standing trees left on the ground, only broken branches and wood everywhere, and hideous cracks. Humphrey he suddenly let out a muffled groan, and subconsciously looked down, only to find a long bloody mark on his chest. Although the wound wasn't very deep, getting injured so quickly was beyond his expectation. This old man's armament hockey didn't block his blade's edge. In this instant, Edward Newgate suddenly remembered Kazuki Oden's special armament hockey technique. The latter had mentioned it when he was still on his ship. However, hearing that it was a secret technique passed down through the Kazuki family for generations, he didn't ask much about it. Because through sparring, he discovered that armament hockey's internal destruction and the tremor fruit ability had a similar effect, and he didn't need this technique himself. He didn't expect to encounter another one now. It seems he not only got Oden's sword from Odin but also learned that hockey technique. When it comes to the skill of a pirate, the world government is more like pirates than we are. Edward Newgate said angrily in his heart. Crack. On Im's side, he stood high above in the void, stepping on invisible air, and at the same time, sheathed Odin's sword in his hand. He crossed his empty hands over his chest, quietly watching Edward Newgate. When he heard the other party's thoughts, he let out a chuckle. So that's why this saint said you, Whitebeard, are nothing but a frog in a well. Alright, I'll let you witness what the Sword Saint realm is, consider it a gift to you. The next moment, as the symphony reached its climax, transparent sword aura, wrapped in golden lightning, appeared in the void behind him. 10, 50, 100, 200, their numbers grew larger and larger. And they were no longer confined to the position behind him, but also spreading out to both sides. In the blink of an eye, they formed a ring centered around Whitebeard. 1,000 lightning sword aura, all pointed their cold, flashing sword tips towards the nearly 7-meter-tall, golden-haired, white-bearded giant holding a blade. This move isn't actually former Imu's, he created it based on the effects of the Sword Saint realm, using the mindset of a transmigrator. So far, the only record is killing Dark King Relay. So what is a Sword Saint? Simply put, one of the abilities is that whether it's the blade edge swung out or the slash, it comes with extremely strong penetration effect, and it's stronger than armament hockey's internal destruction. Whether it's diamond or dragon scales, even armament hockey's defense can be easily broken through. Basically, nothing can't be cut. When it combines with armament hockey's internal destruction technique and Conqueror's hockey coding technique, it forms his current normal attack. Indestructible, penetrating all things, as long as it's within the god's domain. It's a hockey sword that can attack from any angle, any direction, with 360-degree coverage. This is the final result of integrating armament hockey, observation hockey, Conqueror's hockey, and the Sword Saint realm. To counter this attack, it's best to have a weapon that is at least great grade sword rank, or fists hard enough to rival a great grade sword. Armament hockey and observation hockey must also reach a very high level, and hockey emission must be maintained throughout. More importantly, one must have a wide range and powerful attack ability. Only then can one counter by meeting attack with attack. Because simple surface defense is completely ineffective. This refers to people like Big Mom and Kaido. In contrast, Edward Newgate happens to be well equipped in all aspects. If there were two Whitebeards teaming up in this world, they might truly be able to contend with him. The volatile situation, as the first sword aura behind him shot out. An earth-shattering battle officially began. Dense sword aura turned into golden lightning, covering the area like a torrential downpour. Don't underestimate people, I'm Whitebeard. Edward Newgate's eyes burst forth with dazzling brilliance, killing intent like a gale and giant waves, accompanied by a surge of Conqueror's hockey, madly swinging his bisondo in his hand amidst angry roars. Swathes of white light compressed with tremor force swept across the entire area like a tide, countless cracks in the surrounding air spread like a spider web. All the lightning that flew forward, upon contact with the violent impact, seemed to slow down as if trapped in an air swamp, and both cancelled out and exploded alongside the white light cracks. Such dense, high-intensity tremor unsurprisingly caused the entire Rainbow Island to begin shaking violently. More and larger earth cracks kept appearing, broken wood, buildings, and animal corpses sank into the bottomless darkness like a mudslide. The residents on the large ships at sea watched sorrowfully as their homeland slowly died, splitting apart. High above, looked down at the scene like a natural disaster descending, his face full of cold indifference and arrogance. In his eyes, there was only Whitebeard, who was blocking most of the lightning sword aura while striding towards him. He seemed completely unconcerned about the blood holes pierced on his body by the small portion of sword aura. Desperately wanting to defeat that bastard who held the lives of his sons in his hand and still wanted him to submit. Your current appearance makes this saint look forward even more to your demeanor when you appear on the myriad world's battlefield, but first, you need to experience a complete and utter defeat in an instant. Odin's sword was unsheathed again, flashing past in front of him. The next moment, a dark purple blade light over 100 meters high suddenly appeared out of thin air. It was several times larger than the flying slash attack Mihawk swung towards Old White during the summit war in the cannon. It not only split the entire broken island in two, but the dazzling purple light filling the sky also made Edward Newgate's pupil shrink to pinpricks. Chapter 290, Whitebeard establishes a kingdom. The broken Rainbow Island, split in two, suddenly became extremely quiet. The large symphony orchestra on Noah's Ark had long stopped playing, leaving only the sounds of rock formation and broken wood falling into the seawater. Large amounts of seawater gushed out from numerous fissures. It wouldn't be long before the main body of this island was submerged in the deep sea. But apart from the islanders with sad expressions, the big shots of the Whitebeard pirates and the world government didn't care about these matters at all. All eyes were focused on that massive dark purple blade light. Edward Newgate held Murakami-giri in his hand, staring blankly at the sharp purple light less than 10 centimeters from his nose. The supreme-grade sharp sword in his hand had already snapped into two pieces, and he himself had unconsciously knelt on the ground while resisting. This old man lost? This question magnified infinitely in his heart. Since the Rock Pirates disbanded, when had Whitebeard ever lost in a one-on-one duel, especially losing so quickly, losing so completely? Honestly. He was confident that even if Roxy Zebek were resurrected, he might not be able to defeat his current self. But what was going on with this celestial dragon brat who looked like he was only in his 20s? Why was he so strong? Could it be that I, Whitebeard, am not the world's strongest? Could it be that the combat power ceiling of this world is still beyond my imagination? Edward Newgate's mood was heavier than ever before, even falling into self-doubt. Old man actually lost. And Marco, Jazo, and the other crewmates of the Whitebeard pirates who witnessed this scene also began to doubt if they were dreaming. An unbelievable, impossible nightmare. Among them, Marshal D. Teach, who had always been low-key, humble, cheerful, and didn't fight or scheme but harbored terrifying ambition, couldn't believe what he saw. How is this possible? There's actually an existence in this world that's so much stronger than Whitebeard. Just who is this lord? Above Noah's Ark, Stussy, dressed in a black silk-all dress and wearing high heels, stared at him supremely aloof figure with a face full of shock. 5 elders candidate? She suddenly began to doubt this identity. As the most excellent intelligence female agent, she subconsciously felt there was something fishy about it. But no matter what, as long as she served this lord well and stayed by their side to serve, she would know everything she needed to know sooner or later. Just then, Im looked down from above at the world's strongest man kneeling before him. He steadily controlled the massive blade light swung by Inma, and like a deity high above, coldly declared, "Edward Newgate, you will no longer be a pirate. Your bounty is cancelled. Edward Newgate, you will establish a kingdom in your hometown, affiliate with the world government, and have a reverie seat. Edward Newgate, you will be granted the admiral rank and fight for the world government on the myriad world's battlefield. Edward Newgate, your current sons will be assigned to suitable departments and armies based on their abilities." These 4 sentences were heard clearly by everyone nearby. Marco and the others were dumbfounded, simply unable to believe what their ears had heard. Edward Newgate's expression, however, was extremely grim, because the information volume in these few sentences was enormous. The second and fourth sentences seemed like favors, but no matter how he listened, he could feel a strong sense of threat. This meant the world government had already determined the location of his hometown. What would happen if he refused? And his sons, what would happen if he refused? At the same time, the content of the third sentence was the most astonishing. Of course, it wasn't the admiral rank, which he didn't care for, but the myriad worlds battlefield mentioned afterward. What myriad worlds? As the name suggests, literally, it means 10,000 worlds. For some reason, it was like a bolt of lightning exploding in his mind. He suddenly realized the true reason why Big Mom, Shiki, Verndai World, Kaido, and others chose to surrender. It must be inextricably linked to these 2 words. But was that really possible? Silence. Edward Newgate remained silent until Im dispersed the massive blade light. Even his posture of kneeling on the ground remained frozen. Seeing this, Im said no more, merely observing him meaningfully for a few seconds before instantly disappearing into the air. Government officials would subsequently be responsible for providing him with more detailed content. Since Whitebeard didn't resist or refuse on the spot, it meant he had chosen to acquiesce. This was the reason for his prolonged silence. Hometown and family were the strongest bond. Moreover, he had lost so completely, indicating he no longer had the strength to protect these most cherished existences. Yet, Im had given him hope to preserve both through another means. In silence, Edward Newgate chose to shoulder the responsibility of being a man, a captain, and a father. This was also one of the reasons Im admired him the most. The moment he reappeared on the red carpet staircase, the awe-inspiring music began to play again from Noah's Ark above. And this time, the piece was ritual. Compared to the previous Wrath of God and Giant Fortress, this ritual felt more epic. The collective low chanting, the grand and magnificent, solemn and shocking aura, was like the descent of a god, giving a sacred feeling that made one's scalp tingle. Accompanied by such music, Im ascended the hundreds of meters of steps one by one. With every step he took, the Holy Land garrison on both sides would lower their heads. Although they wore visored helmets, one could still feel the reverence in their gaze. Behind him, 3 giant god soldiers followed in column. Saul was in front, Kashi and Doimo were side by side behind him, and further back were the fragmented Rainbow Island and the back view of Whitebeard still half kneeling on the ground. Needless to say, the atmosphere, aura, and overall presence were elevated to the maximum. Therefore, to savor this moment, Im didn't walk very fast. But no matter how long the stairs were, they eventually ended. When he stepped onto the deck of Noah's Ark again, Stassi and Senior Chief Steward came forward to greet him. Their gaze was even more subservient than before, which Im was not surprised by. Inform the 5 elders of the situation here. Yes, Lord Saint Nerona. Senior Chief Steward quickly responded, then turned to carry out the order. Immediately after, Stassi showed her most charming smile. Welcome back. Below, Edward Newgate had straightened up, looking at Murakamagiri, broken in 2 in his hand, with a complex heart. He truly never thought this blade would break one day. Old man, you're injured. Marco, who had manifested as a phoenix, was the first to fly over from the air. Seeing the long bloody wound on the old man's chest, his expression changed drastically, and he quickly used his blue flames to heal his injuries. How is old man doing? We're here, old man. Following closely, Jazu, Vista, and others rushed over, constantly leaping across the cracked island filled with dangerous fissures. Seeing his son's concerned appearance, Edward Newgate's expression showed relief, and his decision became even firmer. Gorrrr, this old man isn't dead yet, but I truly lost. Seeing his dejected expression, the Whitebeard pirates' crewmates looked at each other, unsure how to comfort him. Thatch, the 4th Division commander, hesitated and asked. Then, regarding what that person just said, what is your decision? This old man agreed. Edward Newgate sighed, looking up at the massive white ship covering the sky. Let's establish a kingdom. Let's build a country of our own. Chapter 291, The First Ability User in the Otherworld. Holy Land Mary Ejos, in the Room of Authority within Pangaea Castle, the 5 elders gathered once again. The Otherworld Committee has decided to first understand the basic situation of the world before sending construction personnel to build the Stargate base on the other side. St. Topman Warcurry sat in the center with the demeanor of a big shot, his fingers interlaced in front of him, his voice carrying the authority of a superior. Yes. St. Shepherd Jupiter sat on a separate sofa beside him, his right fist loosely supporting his chin, striking the pose most suitable for a handsome middle-aged man like himself, a handsome smile on his face. This time, Captain Lucci of Cypher Pol 9 will lead the command, and members with a height of around 1.8 meters will be selected from other squads. At the same time, there's Steve Gus from the new squad, Meko, and Hazami. Hearing this, St. Topman Warcurry frowned and asked. Steve Gus is one thing, but the other 2 Kabinarai, haven't they only received a few months of training? Although he wasn't responsible for intelligence matters, it didn't mean he was completely ignorant. The knowledge and skills required for a qualified agent couldn't be mastered overnight. So the 2 will be assigned to Steve Gus and Lucci. Their height is suitable, and they are girls. If the second world also has human civilization, it will be easy to infiltrate it. Moreover, Kabinarai can be created. St. Shepherd Jupiter didn't hide anything and explained the considerations of the Cypher Pol headquarters. To put it plainly, they felt that using these otherworlders to explore the unknown otherworld was the best choice. If these people weren't professional enough, they might not have even sent C-Star people like Lucci as the first batch of personnel. There was no other way. C-Star people who had been to or knew the inside story of the Kabinarai world would more or less have a psychological sense of superiority. The other 4-5 elders also nodded secretly upon hearing this. Pururu, just then, the transponder snail on the coffee table suddenly called out. St. Topman Warcurry took the initiative to answer it. Soon, the transponder snail's face changed. Lord, news has come from St. Nerona's side, Whitebeard Edward Newgate has already. The speaker was none other than Chief of Staff Alexander Watson. He reported the content from Noah's Ark word for word. What? Before he could finish, the 5 elders present all changed their expression drastically. Lord Imu made a move against Whitebeard? Founding a nation. The 5 looked at each other. To be honest, although they had planned for these things long ago, Im hadn't revealed them in advance, so they were caught off guard. After the transponder snail finished its report and closed its eyes again, St. Marcus Mars sincerely sighed. With this, 90% of the New World Sea area has been rectified. Indeed, only Elbaf is left. St. Jaga Ursha Saturn strongly agreed. Although there were still many so-called underworld influence in the second half of the Grand Line, These were not considered difficult opponents in their eyes. Big Mom's upcoming tea party was precisely prepared to deal with them. Saint Ethenborough Venusjiro, on the other hand, was in a good mood, knowing that the military under him had gained another highest combat power. Whitebeard actually accepted the admiral rank, plus the previous Big Mom. Although it was just the admiral rank and not an active admiral in the army or marines, they could be ordered to mobilize through the command department whenever needed. It seems this old man's political affairs department is going to be busy again. St. Topman Warcurry was thinking about how many resources would need to be invested to help Whitebeard establish a kingdom. But no matter how much, it had to be done. For the world government, this was a venture with only profit and no loss. Should we announce this matter immediately? St. Marcus Mars looked over. No. St. Topman Warcurry did a shake head and said. This old man plans to announce the matters concerning her, Kaido, and Whitebeard together after Big Mom's tea party, in order to maximize intimidation for pirates and affiliated countries throughout the whole world. That's a good idea. Saint Shepherd Jupiter praised, then changed the topic. By the way, Lord Amu previously asked us to send 10 Kabanrai world people to Wano country for secret execution. Why is that? Saint Jaga Ursha Saturn glanced at him with a serious expression. Since Lord didn't explain the reason, it means it's not something we should know. We just need to follow orders. That's not difficult. Kongakaku still holds many refusing officials that Bullet and others caught. Have Cypher Paul grab 10 from there and send them to Mihawk using a flying warship, and that'll do. St. Topman Warcurry said expressionlessly. Speaking of which, Lord Amu also promised them a Paramsha system devil fruit before. How was that matter handled? St. Marcus Mars asked again. This topic also aroused the curiosity of the others. Oh? What kind of fruit was sent? Meanwhile, in the Shogun's mansion within Kongakaku, the capital of Hinamoto in the Kabanrai world, Yatsugawa Ayame and Kurisu were kneeling on the tatami, one on the left and one on the right. In front of them was Senior Director Linode, an advisor from the world government. He was now also included in the Other World Strategy Committee. This is the devil fruit you exchanged for 500 million Bailey. Congratulations, Chief Steward Kurisu, you will be the first ability user in this world to possess supernatural power. After speaking, Senior Director Linode gently pushed the exquisite mahogany box towards Kurisu. The latter, seeing this, felt some nervousness, clenched his fists, and subconsciously looked towards his wife beside him. He found that Yatsugawa Ayame's eyes were also full of worry. Because they had already learned from the other party about the uncontrollable risks associated with this devil fruit, such as the possibility of gene collapse due to the differences in human bodies from different worlds. It's okay, I'm willing to gamble. Perhaps it was a man's nature, seeing the woman worry about him, Kurisu became even braver instead, just to alleviate the unease in his wife's heart. He saw him no longer hesitate and opened the smooth box lid. Immediately, a strange fruit shaped like a tomato, but pale white all over with light green spiral patterns floating on its surface, appeared before the two of them. According to the Devil Fruit Encyclopedia, this is the Paramsha system scythe fruit. Its ability allows the user to release scythe-like compressed wind blades, capable of crushing stones and cutting iron with ease. It's very suitable for you, who are the samurai chief steward. Senior Director Linode gave a slight smile. But Kurisu, hearing his introduction, felt his heart tremble, and an expression of excitement and anticipation appeared in his eyes. He saw him extend his hands, pick up the devil fruit, and then, under Yatsugawa Ayame's gaze, which was filled with extreme nervousness, open his mouth and take a fierce bite of the white and green fruit flesh. Splurt. Ugh. Oh, as soon as Kurisu ate it, his expression instantly turned pale, and he even looked like he wanted to vomit. This made Yatsugawa Ayame unable to sit still. She quickly hugged her husband's arm and anxiously asked. What's wrong, Kurisu? And nothing, I'm fine. It just tastes so bad it really doesn't seem like something a human would eat. Kurisu finally managed to swallow the fruit flesh, then forced a smile. He looked towards Senior Director Linode and asked bitterly, you said before that I only needed to eat one bite, right? Right. Senior Director Linode looked at him with surprise, then smiled and said. Since you are still safe and sound now, congratulations, the worst possibility did not occur. Now you can feel your body and then try your ability. Okay. Kurisu did a stand up immediately, then closed his eyes for a few seconds. When he opened his eyes again, his face was covered with shock and ecstasy. At the same time, his right palm began to do a shake left and right, and the speed of vibration became faster and faster, quickly turning into an afterimage, also accompanied by a strong whistling sound. Swish. The moment he swung his right palm, a nearly invisible air current shot out, completely tearing apart the tatami and floor in front of him. So powerful. Yatsugawa Ayame looked at this scene in disbelief. But before she could show an expression of surprise, she saw Kurisu's body tremble, and he staggered back several steps. "What's wrong with you?" "Cough, cough, cough, I just suddenly became very tired, and my arm feels a bit swollen and painful," Kurisu said, covering his right arm, covered in sweat. Chapter 292, Admiral Whitebeard. The Moby Dick, this great ship like a blue whale, was very lively at this time. Many crewmates were moving food and fresh water from inside the cabins to another sea ship. This ship was precisely the one Im had given to the residents of Rainbow Island. After all, having destroyed their island, it was only right to provide them with a temporary ship. As for why the Whitebeard pirates were so enthusiastic. Firstly, Rainbow Island was originally one of their territories. Secondly, the old man had decided to take them with him to their hometown, Chin Island, and become the first batch of citizens of the Whitebeard Kingdom along with the people there. At this moment, Noah's Ark had not yet left and still hung high above everyone's heads, but its long and wide stairs had been retracted. And Edward Newgate, along with the 16 captains, were gathered on the 4th floor inside the Moby Dick. This was Edward Newgate's own resting cabin, so it was the most spacious. There was no helping it, this big shot's height was, after all, 6 meters and 66 centimeters. Besides them, there were also 3 men in black in suits and ties. One was an official from the administrative department, and the other 2 were Cypher Pol 7 agents responsible for political affairs protection. But these people were not the main focus. The virtual screen projected into the air by the visual Den Den Mushi was, and it completely captivated the attention of all the Whitebeard pirates higher-ups, including Edward Newgate. The content was similar to what Kaido had seen in his prison cell in Impel Down. However, there were more materials about the other world. For example, to prove that the Great Sea in the Kubanrai world truly allowed ability users to swim, they even included a screen feed of Charlotte Linlin wearing a swimsuit and playing in the sea a few days ago. That curvaceous, full-figured mature beauty made quite a few captains unconsciously swallow their saliva. It must be said that although Charlotte Linlin's figure had expanded a bit now, overall, it was still very good. Moreover, the appearance of this world's strongest woman completely dispelled the doubts of everyone present. Stargate. So that's what the other world is like. Marco, Jazu, Vista, Thatch, Blumenko, Rakuyo, Blenheim, Curiel, and others all had a feeling of both shock and sudden realization. They finally understood why Big Mom and Kaido had suddenly betrayed their stance, and at the same time, their resistance to being incorporated by the world government lessened significantly. Because no one wasn't curious about the other world. Furthermore, the administrative official had already explained that the path of multiverse conquest had no end and was full of the unknown and danger. If all the combat power of Planet C was not gathered, then perhaps one day, upon encountering another world civilization of equal or greater strength, it was entirely possible for them to be invaded on a large scale into their homeland. What good would it do then to rule supreme only in the new world? This principle. Everyone present could fully understand it. Future combat, no, war, the scale of war would expand infinitely to the level of world and world. At that point, so-called pirate crews would truly be child's play. Seeing this, hearing this, and thinking about this, even Edward Newgate, who had remained silent in the main seat, had to admit. The world government's action of setting aside past contradictions and grudges and uniting with these great pirate influence was indeed the most correct course of action. Bearing the fate of the world. He suddenly remembered the words spoken by Saint Nerona at this moment. He had already learned the name and identity of the person who defeated him from these people. Those words were truly correct. If the world government were to truly lose to another world civilization one day and be invaded through the Stargate, then everyone in the whole world would be finished, either facing destruction or being enslaved. That included him and his sons. Suddenly, this Whitebeard no longer felt much aversion to becoming an admiral. After all, he couldn't possibly just sit by and watch the army from another world invade Planet C. From this perspective, with his great strength, he could certainly be called an admiral of the Sea Star civilization. This was the benefit of introducing external conflict. Originally, great pirates and the world government were in an opposing relationship, but once an other world influence appeared that required both sides to join forces to deal with, they naturally stood on the same side. Sea area, new world location, future country Baltimore characters, Army General Akainu Sakazuki, Academy of Science Dean Dr. Vegapunk. So my mission is to create a dormant volcano that won't erupt in the zone you've designated? Sakazuki stood on the deck of the warship, squinting at the distant, hazy winter island. Beside him was Dr. Vegapunk. Behind the two stood a group of Marine officer and Academy of Science researchers. Don't be surprised why Sakazuki, despite being an army general, was riding on a marine warship. Because according to the latest division of duties, the Marines are responsible for sailing the ships for the army, and then the army deals with targets on the island that the police force cannot handle. As long as the targets didn't run out to the Great Sea, the Marines could only watch obediently, at most helping to blockade the island's coastline. It could be said that they had completely lost the authority to engage in ground combat. That's right. Dr. Vegapunk had an unusually long skull and was about 2 meters tall. His figure looked very thin and long, and paired with that white coats, he looked like a white stick. Our team has completed the plan. Once a volcano appears, we will drill an experimental well and a production well nearby, and then pour a large amount of the island's ice and snow into the experimental well. This way, the ice and snow will be melted by the magma, turning into a large amount of cold water. Sufficient water pressure will then cause tiny cracks in the impermeable rock layer, triggering micro-earthquakes and forming water storage space. Once the underground rock layer fractures to a certain extent, it will form a closed loop with the other production well, allowing steam to be brought to the ground. Steam propulsion will drive a high-pressure turbine, generating clean electrical energy. In addition, we will also have the construction department help lay pipelines so that the hot water can be utilized to provide continuous heating for every building and street on the island. This will not only keep the indoors warm but also warm the roads to accelerate the melting of ice and snow. Speaking of the renovation and improvement of his hometown, Dr. Vegapunk became exceptionally excited. Not only did he talk much more than usual, but he also waved his hands from time to time, his face full of smiles. He had initially considered having Kizaru come and use his awakening to directly disperse the clouds above Baltigo, turning it from a winter island into a spring island or summer island. However, after communicating with the residents on the island, he found that most people did not want the winter island environment to disappear, as they had become accustomed to days filled with snow falling everywhere. The problem now was that it was too cold indoors, so cold that they had to wear thick winter clothes even at home. Therefore, they still chose to have Sakazuki come and create a complete geothermal energy utilization system. This was actually an upgraded version of his large heating furnace plan from back then. It was just that back then, due to insufficient funding and technology, it was forced to stop. Now things were different. Not only did he have strong support in funding, resources, and technology from the world government, but he was also provided with an awakened Logia system Mag fruit ability user. That's right. In the eyes of Dr. Vegapunk, Sakazuki's only value was his ability to create a permanent volcano and permanent geothermal energy resources. Alright, bring the planning map. I'll go create a volcano now. Sakazuki could be said to be a model soldier. He purely treated this as a mission, thinking about completing it as quickly as possible and then returning to army headquarters. After all, the exploration of the second otherworld had already begun. Chapter 293, Captain Rasky and Mumai. Looking out, the large green forest connected like an ocean. Sunlight, like strands of golden sand, passed through layers of branches and leaves, then sprinkled onto the soil blooming with various wildflowers, occasionally emitting an enticing fragrance. The birds in the forest flew and cried, overwhelming the roars of the insect and wild beast. Mount Fuji, a black-haired girl with amber eyes, wearing a pink Japanese-style short skirt, carried a steam gun at her waist and a slightly short blade on her back. She was standing at the very top of a large tree, gazing in surprise at the other end of the sea of trees, where a high mountain towered into the clouds with a snow-capped peak, resembling a jade fan hanging upside down in the air. Although she had never seen the sacred mountain of Inamoto in the ancestral world with her own eyes, related pictures were everywhere, and basically everyone knew of it. But now she actually saw it in another world. This truly felt like fate playing a big joke on her. And she, of course, was Hazumi, a member of the Cypher Pol News Squad, currently under the world government, from Kabaneri World. The reason they called Kabaneri World the ancestral world was because they didn't like using Kabaneri World as the name of their native world, but they couldn't change the world government's decision, so a few of them discussed using Ancestral World or Katetsujo World as code name. After all, compared to the death terror brought by Kabaneri World, Iron Fortress represents Station City, train, symbolizing hope and safety for them. Actually, they also thought about suggesting to the higher-ups changing the name of Kabaneri World to Katetsujo World, but they were refused on the grounds that changing the files would be too troublesome. This made them realize their status and influence within the world government were too low. Yes. This was the new world inside the second Stargate. Mumai, what did you see? At this moment, a very cold inquiry came from below. Hazumi didn't dare to delay after hearing it, quickly flipped over and used several thick, long tree trunks, and swiftly returned into the sea of trees. Captain Rasky, this is a very large forest, and I also saw. The little girl, facing Lucci's sharp gaze, her little face tense with some nervousness, quickly began to report. That's right. This otherworld exploration mission had Hazumi and Lucci as one group. His wife Mata did not participate because she went to Kona Island to visit her daughter. Or rather, most of the Cypher Pol 9 agent members did not participate because their body size was too large, so they selected personnel with suitable builds from Mother Cypher Pol agent squad. Although Lucci also had a height of 2 meters, he had rich experience and was strong in combat power. Considering the exploration team needed frontline command, he was still sent, and also to look after the only 12-year-old Hazumi. It is worth mentioning that for the convenience of executing the mission, Hazumi once again used Mumai as her code name. Different worlds, yet 2 identical mountains. Lucci finished listening to Mumai's words, thoughtfully scanned the surrounding forest environment, then said, "Let's walk some more. See if there are any other places you familiarize." "Yes." As Mumai agreed, the 2-person squad began to traverse the vast sea of trees at high speed. Later, to increase speed and save stamina, they leaped from the ground onto tree trunks and then quickly jumped between tree trunks. It must be said, after several months of training at Cypher Pol headquarters, Mumai's skills had improved significantly compared to before. Of course, this was also inextricably linked to her upgrading from an ordinary Kabanrai to a new. When the sunset was about to go down, and the sky also revealed a hint of night, they totally walked out of this somewhat exaggerated large forest. They continued walking along the mountain path, and this time both of them slowed their steps, looking like a young father and daughter with quite high appearances. What was interesting was that the current Lucci was not wearing his favorite suit and leather boots, nor was he wearing dark red sunglasses on his face. Instead, he was wearing a vermilion samurai attire of ordinary material and carried a katana with a red hilt and black sheath at his waist. This was an attire adjustment made based on the experience from the previous Kabanrai world. Although he couldn't say the second world was also Japanese style, it was still better than black suits that clearly came from a certain tissue. Not long after, Lucci and Yumai saw fields planted with lush green crops appearing ahead. The 2 exchanged a gaze, both understanding the other's thoughts. Human civilization also existed in this world. "Hey! Why are you coming from the forest with a child, and it's almost dark? You're too careless as a father, aren't you?" At this moment, an old man carrying a hoe, with legs full of mud, walked from his own cultivated field onto the path, looking in surprise at the 2 blurry black shadow, one tall and one short, in the distance. Walking closer, Lucci glanced at the old man's attire and thought to himself, "I really didn't change my clothing wrongly. It seems we've encountered another Japanese-style world." He found it strange. Is Wano country style so famous that every world has it? Also, what this person said was also Japanese a language. "I am a samurai. I was just training in the mountains with my daughter." But thinking is one thing. On the surface, without any hesitation, he stated the identity they had set. Samurai. This old man carrying a hoe looked in surprise at the katanas on Lucci and Mumai and thought to himself, "The sword ban edict has been in effect for decades, how could?" But a humble smile appeared on his face, and his upper body bent slightly. He quickly apologized. "Excuse me, this old man didn't expect to encounter a samurai lord, please forgive me. We need a residence tonight. Lead the way." As soon as Lucci saw the old man's attitude, he instantly guessed that samurai should have high status in this country, so his tone naturally carried a feeling of arrogance. Okay, please come this way." The old man was actually not very willing in his heart. After all, samurai, these blade-carrying creature, were very dangerous, but given the current situation, he didn't dare to refuse rashly. The 3 walked, 1 in front and 2 behind, on the lowest path between the fields. And before long, they entered the village where dozens of wooden houses stood. This place. Mumai looked at the scene of men and women in kimono walking all over the street and instantly felt a sense of familiar eyes wash over her. It was almost like returning to a certain station city inside the city in the ancestral world. Is this the other world? And their appearance clearly aroused the curiosity of the neighbors. After all, outsiders rarely came to such a small rural place, let alone 2 people carrying katanas. Lucci, through the old man's communication with others, also learned that he was the village chief here, named Yamana. This aroused the former's interest. Since he was the village chief, he must know more than ordinary people, right? Arriving at village chief Yamana's house, sure enough, as expected of the village chief, it was indeed much larger than the wooden houses of other villagers. 3 wooden houses formed a small courtyard in a pin character shape. "Samurai lord, you and your daughter can stay in this room." This was the original copy of this old man's son's room, but he hasn't returned since he went into the mountains to collect herbs with 2 friends 10 days ago. As soon as this matter was mentioned, village chief Yamana became particularly sad. Even though he was used to seeing birth, aging, sickness, and death, the disappearance of a son was still a matter difficult to let go of. Just like the villagers said, He actually also felt he was probably bitten and taken away by a wild beast in the mountains. Fortunately, he still had a younger son in the fortress, so his bloodline wouldn't be cut off. Okay, thank you very much then. Lucci didn't hear much useful information from the other party's words and lost interest. After casually dismissing him, he took Mumai and walked into this wooden house of about 50 square meters. After the village chief left, he didn't care if Mumai found a place to sit down and rest. Instead, he took out a small transponder snail and contacted the Stargate side in a low voice. Chapter 294, A 13-Year-Old Sword Master? Veil-like clouds drifted erratically in the night sky. The original copy bright starlight dimmed, making the village, where every household had extinguished their lights, appear even darker. However, a sudden sound of footsteps broke the silent atmosphere. Not long after, rapid, heavy panting, accompanied by increasingly approaching footsteps, sounded on the street. Soon, a young man holding a katana and wearing a purple hori ran against the night wind, covered in sweat. Damn it, why am I so unlucky? I just wanted to eat some wild game, chased a pig into the mountains, and ended up encountering a demon. Although he was determined to join the Demon Slayer Corps and eliminate these man-eating evil demons, he hadn't joined yet, had he? The key was that the demon was so powerful, he didn't seem to be its opponent. The young man seemed unable to run anymore. He looked back behind him and felt relieved when he saw that the demon didn't seem to be chasing him. He propped his hands on his bent knees, panting heavily to recover his breathing. He gave a bitter smile and said, "Sigh, with my level, can I really pass the final selection?" Whoosh, but before he could finish his self-mockery, a sharp whistling sound suddenly struck. This caused the young man's expression to change drastically, and he desperately lunged to the left. Bang, there was a loud noise behind him. When he rolled several times on the ground, looking quite disheveled, and raised his head to look, he saw with terror that the spot where he had been standing had been smashed into a large dent by a 2-meter-tall figure with pale white skin color and 2 horns on its head. The smoke and dust stirred up filled the surroundings, looking very imposing and giving off a sense of oppression. "Heh, you sure can run, slippery little thing, you were really hard to catch in the forest. But you brought me to a good place," hissed this humanoid monster, whose eye whites were black, with almost invisible pupils and filled with bloodshot veins, tilted its neck back, enjoying the caress of the moonlight while taking a deep breath of air. With a face full of enjoyment, it grinned sinisterly. The scent of food, so much of it however, this place felt somewhat familiarized to it, but it just couldn't remember. But that wasn't important, it would eat the unusual meat in front of it first. "It's over, am I really going to die here? I just finished my training." Tears welled up in the sword-wielding young man's heart, but his mindset was still good. He didn't lose his reason due to despair, instead, he began to comfort himself. "Fortunately, there are no young girls here. When I get eaten later, it won't be too embarrassing." The white demon, however, couldn't hold back. Its mouth split open, revealing fangs stuck with flesh and blood. It fiercely stepped and cracked the street dent again, and pounced forward like an arrow released from a bowstring, bending its sharp 10-fingernail. "Heya, just obediently accept death, little piece of meat." Its speed was astonishing. If it were an ordinary person, they might not be able to make any reaction at all. But the young man wasn't. He took a relatively calm deep breath, swallowing the crisp, cold air in large gulps into his body. Soon, his original copy weak body seemed to swell slightly. His arm muscle became tighter, and veins bulged on his neck and forehead. He was going to fight with all his might. The young man rotated counterclockwise on the spot, narrowly dodging the white demon's straight pounce and bite. At the same time, he swung the long saber with purple patterns in his hand. First form, winding snake curved slash. A miraculous scene appeared. A visible light purple arc-shaped air current actually emerged on his blade, attempting to slash towards the white demon's back. But the white demon's speed seemed faster than his blade. It blocked the blade edge with its right arm in time, while viciously grabbing towards the young man's throat with its left hand. This is bad. Although he successfully cut off the white demon's arm, there was no joy on the latter's face. The young man thought in his heart, his teacher had taught him that at times like this, he could use the second form to get behind the opponent and easily cut off their head. But the first form was his most practiced move. Although he also knew the second form, switching between different sword techniques freely in combat. "Sorry, teacher, he couldn't do it." "Sigh, am I going to die? What a pity, I heard that there would be some cute and brave young girls in the final selection. Now I won't have a chance to see them." Facing the demon claw getting closer and closer, in this instant of wandering thoughts, this young man's mind seemed not quite normal. "Should I close my eyes now?" Bang, just as the young man was preparing to close his eyes to welcome death, his eyelids were just about to come down when the demon claw before him, with pale white skin color but black fingernail and blood foam stuck in the gaps, was suddenly blown apart by something. That's right. It turned into a pile of mangled flesh and burst open. Immediately after, before he could react, it seemed someone behind him grabbed his shoulder. As a huge strength came, his whole person flew backward. In midair, the young man saw a pink, petite figure quickly appear. Immediately after, with a muffled bang, the white demon also flew out. In the blink of an eye, he and the white demon almost simultaneously landed and fell down. Ouch! The young man's buttocks hurt from the fall, but this made him very happy, because it meant he was still alive. He then quickly looked up at the short-haired back figure standing in the court. You are? But as soon as he saw the curved blade katana tied to her back, he seemed to understand something. Hey, another one ran over, and it's a tender-skinned and soft-fleshed little girl. Speaking of which, I really haven't eaten one yet, just right to try something new. The white demon, however, flipped over and stood up, patted its chest that had been kicked, and sized up Mumai's whole body with a sinister grin. Your arm recovered? Mumai, holding a steam gun, was surprised to see that the opponent's right arm, which had been cut off by the blade, and its left hand, which had been shot and mangled by her gun, had both completely recovered. This scene was also seen by Lucci, who was hidden on the rooftop of a certain building. He also noticed that the commotion here was so big, yet surprisingly none of the nearby residents came out to take a look. Even village chief Yamana, who provided them with residence, was the same. Clearly, judging from their aura, they had already woken up. What are you? On the street below, Mumai aimed her muzzle and shouted sharply. This question dumbfounded the white demon. For a moment, it didn't know how to answer. At this moment, the young man behind Mumai, who had already gotten up, walked to her side holding his katana and asked in surprise. Didn't your teacher tell you about demons? He was treating Mumai as a demon slayer core candidate going to the final selection, just like himself. After all, judging from the opponent's skill, she had definitely mastered a breathing style. It's just that this cute little girl, why was she holding a musket? That's not right, given the situation at the time. If she hadn't used the gun, she couldn't have saved me at all. It must be because of this. Maybe she did, I didn't remember. Mumai lifted her chin and said confidently and righteously. This arrogant little look of hers, paired with that absolutely beautiful pretty face, immediately made the young man's heart flutter. So cute. Then recall properly in my belly. The white demon laughed wildly and charged forward fiercely again. They were just two little kids, just right as its first meal after coming down the mountain. Be careful. If we cooperate, it should be no problem. Oh right, my name is Gu Shiwen, and I'm 13 years old this year. The young man hurriedly introduced himself, thinking in his heart that if he still couldn't win later, at least he would have let the other party know his name. But thinking is thinking, he didn't want to lose face in front of such a cute girl. He immediately brandished his blade to meet the white demon, shouting loudly. Second form, narrow head poison fang. He stepped with strange steps, and with unimaginable movements, instantly got behind the white demon. The purple-patterned long saber in his hand, wrapped in a layer of appearing arc-shaped air current, bit towards its back neck like a purple snake. A bit interesting. Lucci on the rooftop narrowed his eyes when he saw this scene. He can emit sword aura at such a young age? But the strength shown. No matter how you look at it, it hasn't reached the level of a sword master. Chapter 295, I'm dead, bang 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 bang. On the deserted and empty village street, three afterimages fiercely fought under the moonlight. Among them, a pink afterimage and a purple afterimage ganged up on the white shadow in the middle. Their speed was quite fast compared to ordinary people, while not completely invisible to the naked eye, it was enough to be dazzling. The key was the somewhat frightening gunshots echoing through the night. Mumai was actually slacking off like crazy at this moment because she wanted to observe this young man named Gu Shiwen and the obviously non-human monster more closely. The young man's swordsmanship was very interesting, and the monster's self-healing ability was also quite magical. After several months of training and learning at Cypher Pol headquarters, she clearly understood her current mission was not to defeat anyone, but to collect more intelligence about the new world. So even though she felt she could easily blast through the monster's head or heart, she didn't strike ruthlessly. She only used a steam gun loaded with jet bullets in her hand to help Gu Shiwen when he was in danger. In Mumai's opinion, no matter what kind of monster it was, destroying its head and heart would surely kill it. However, her actions confused the young man. Seeing the cute little girl use her musket to shoot through the white demon's arm again, he quickly shouted. What are you doing? Use the Nichiren blade on your back. Guns can't kill demons. Gu Shiwen didn't expect the other party to be so ignorant. What did the trainer responsible for her training teach her? Or did they teach her, and this girl just didn't remember at all? But Mumai's extreme agility also left him speechless. Her movements seemed to have no pattern, yet she could easily dodge the white demon's various attacks. What school is her breathing style from? However, his shout also attracted Lucci's attention in the distance. The next moment, his voice sounded in a hidden short-range wireless earphone in Mumai's left ear. Mumai, first shoot through its heart. If it can still recover, then shoot through its head. Mumai heard the order and didn't reply, but her gaze instantly sharpened. She did a backflip to dodge the white demon's attack, simultaneously leaping behind it. Before she even fully landed, she directly pulled the trigger towards its back while still in midair. Bang, splurt, a jet bullet shot out from the muzzle, penetrating through the white demon's chest at the heart position. This caused it to cough up a mouthful of blood, but a cold smile was plastered on its face. That hurts so much. After speaking, it kicked Gu Shiwen away. At the same time, its head turned 180 degrees backward, and its arms and legs also rotated with a crack, presenting an effect where Mumai was behind the white demon, yet they were facing each other. Ew, that's disgusting. Mumai suddenly felt this monster was even more nauseating than the Kabanrai world. She first quickly spun the steam gun with the finger on the trigger, then grabbed the slender muzzle, and swung it forcefully. Using the sturdy gun stock, she smashed away the extending demon claws like a club. Immediately after, she spun the steam gun again, pointed the muzzle at the white demon's astonished face, and pulled the trigger without hesitation, blasting its ugly head apart with one shot. To dodge the splashing blood and brain matter, Mumai flipped over again, quickly creating distance, and finally landed beautifully and steadily. This scene left Gu Shiwen, who had fallen not far away, stunned. So strong, but it was useless. The young man shook his head and sighed helplessly. As expected, Lucci and Mumai saw that even though the white demon's entire head was gone, its body still stood steadily there. Then, blood vessels, meat, neck bones, skull, skin, and facial features rapidly grew from its neck. In the blink of an eye, a completely intact head had grown back. Immediately, 3 big question marks appeared above their heads. Even the well-informed Lucci was shocked at this moment. What kind of monster is this? That's why I said, you can't kill a demon without cutting off its head with a niche iron blade. Hurry and take out the niche iron blade on your back. Gu Shiwen, whose chest was aching from the kick, stood up and shouted anxiously. This girl's agility was so amazing, so as long as she used a niche iron blade, wouldn't solving the opponent be a matter of minutes? But little did he know, Mumai had no idea what a niche iron blade was. The next second, Lucci's voice appeared in her ear. Mumai, what that kid is talking about should be the katana in his hand. Huh, it ran away. At the same time, Gu Shiwen suddenly pointed at the white demon, which had already turned around and was running away, and shouted. It turned out that the white demon had realized that Mumai's strength was stronger than its own, but she just didn't have a niche iron blade in her hand. Of course, it had to seize this good opportunity to escape. It wasn't a fool. Bang, with another gunshot, its left lower leg suddenly broke off, and its entire body lost control and fell to the ground. This made it start to panic. Just as it was about to grow back its lower leg and continue running, another gunshot broke its other leg. This forced the white demon to grit its teeth, crawl forward while controlling its lower legs to continue self-healing. The long bloodstain looked quite eerie. Suddenly, Mumai had jumped in front of it at some point. The latter raised its head and subconsciously looked over, only to see the former giving it a cute smile and a pitch-black muzzle. Bang! The next moment, the white demon's head exploded again, and it also lost its vision, falling into darkness. Just as it continued to heal its head, it heard the little girl laugh. I still have 5 magazines here, each with 7 jet bullets. I'm very curious how many times you can grow your head? These words made the white demon's body stiffen. This was clearly a desperate situation. Although it was confident that it could definitely exhaust the opponent's bullets before dawn, healing its head 35 more times would indeed consume a large amount of stamina, but at least it wouldn't die. But the problem was that the opponent very likely had a niche iron blade, just hadn't used it yet. And even if she didn't, the other boy had one. No matter how you looked at it, it was a dead end, because before it could recover its head 35 times, they could definitely cut off its head. It was only then that the white demon realized how fatal the effect of temporarily losing its 5 senses when its head was blown off was. The power of this gun was simply too great. One shot could blow up the entire head. If it were an ordinary musket, it would at most only make a hole. Hey, give me your blade. At this moment, Mumai held the steam gun aimed at the white demon's head, while speaking sweetly to the approaching Gu Shiwen. Huh? Gu Shiwen looked at the short sword on Mumai's back in confusion and asked. Don't you have a blade? Less nonsense. To cover up the fact that she didn't have a niche iron blade, Mumai deliberately adopted a strong and sundeer posture, which was also her original appearance. Alright. Gu Shiwen only thought that the little girl didn't want to use her own blade, and immediately handed over the Nichiren blade in his hand. This made the white demon's body on the ground tremble, desperately trying to speed up its self-healing. But a demon's self-healing ability was linked to its own strength. It was simply not a matter of effort. Cut it. Lucci gave the order from the shadows. If it were just the white demon, they might have chosen to capture it and extract more intelligence from its mouth. But now there was also Gushiwen, so it was better to try the effect of the Nichiren blade on the demon. Splurt, Mumai was very fast. Just as the white demon's head had recovered to its chin, she slashed across its neck and cut it off. As expected, its head stopped growing back. Huh? Immediately after, the white demon's body quickly turned into ash before their eyes and disappeared without a trace. Tell me everything you know about demons. Mumai turned her face and looked at Gushiwen very seriously, but little did she know how cute she looked in the latter's eyes in this state. Such a cool, beautiful, and strong young girl was simply the wife of the young man's dream, even though he was only 13 years old. Hearing Mumai's words, he sighed helplessly and dotingly. It's clear you didn't listen carefully. Alright, I'll tell you. This time, you have to listen carefully. Okay. Mumai nodded obediently. This expression made Gushiwen cover his rapidly beating heart again. Ah, I'm dead. Chapter 296, Alien Strategy Committee. C-Star Homeworld, Red Line Zone RL 1995, Alien Strategy Committee Headquarters. A floor covering a full 500 square meters served as the command center here. 20 visual Denmashi projected a wide wall of virtual screens into the air. At the same time, a group of technicians wearing headphones sat behind the control consoles, either monitoring the screens they were responsible for or communicating softly with someone. The sound of typing keyboards was the main melody here. The screen feeds on these virtual screens showed 10 important targets in the Kubenrai world, such as Kongakaku, Yashiro Station, and the Stargate base, while the other 10 were related to the second Stargate world. Among them were surveillance feeds of the situation around the other end of the Stargate, as well as live broadcasted footage from exploration personnel. Monitoring two worlds simultaneously, one could see the potential and power of this otherworld committee from here. Because the world government's official writing was English language, it naturally also had an exclusive term, Alien Strategy Committee, abbreviated as ASC. The general meaning was Alien Strategy Defense Attack and Logistics Support Bureau. Although its emblem superficially looked like just the world government symbol in black on a white background, which was very ordinary, a closer look would reveal that the 5 spheres contained spiral black star clusters. The deeper meaning within was self-evident. It seems this is a quite lively Japanese-style country. Kong Ming, wearing a green patterned yellow robe paired with a white justice coat and holding a feather fan, looked at the scene of several brightly lit night markets with a dense flow of people, appearing quite happy. A place as lifeless as the Kubenrai world was truly uninteresting. Cypher Paul dispatched 10 squads, centering on the Great Forest where the Stargate was located, spreading out in all directions to infiltrate. This resulted in some teams still wandering aimlessly in the wilderness, while others had already discovered villages, towns, or large cities with dense populations. Although most people wear kimonos, some are wearing suits. Looking at the electric lights, cars, and trams, this world's technology level is much higher than the Kubenrai world. Another vice-chairman, Bulwer Gabriel, said, followed immediately by Chairman Fernandez, who was seated at the head of the meeting table. I saw some shop signs written in English language. Coupled with the feedback from exploration personnel who can understand the Japanese language of these otherworlders, it seems communication won't be a concern. However, there is one matter worth our special attention. The geographical environment of this new world seems similar to the Kubenrai world. This has been confirmed by the Kubenrai world side, at least Mount Fuji and the Great Forest are the same. Most importantly, the country in this new world is called Japan. Speaking up to this point, the chairman's tone was quite surprised. Hinamoto and Japan, different worlds, yet only a single character difference. This was indeed quite miraculous. After hearing this, Kong Ming said thoughtfully. If that's the case, does that mean the map of the Kubenrai world is also applicable to this Japan? Also, the ore-veined locations and the various continents overseas. The difference between the two is that this world doesn't have the Kabane swarm, so it has preserved the complete civilizations of various countries. Chairman Fernandez and the other 4 vice-chairmen exchanged glances, all feeling that his conjecture was highly probable. If it were true, the difficulty of subsequent exploration would significantly decrease. I believe our next focus should be on this world's military level and international relations. After all, the world government's opponent will always only be another whole world. Chairman, Captain Rasky's live broadcast screen feed is coming in. Just as Kong Ming finished speaking, not far away, a technician reported. These higher-ups big shots quickly looked over. However, what appeared first was not Lucci's voice as expected, but a scene of three people fiercely fighting in the street under the moonlight. Soon, they recognized the pink-clothed, short-skirted girl holding a short musket, because not long ago these people had discussed whether or not to let this 12-year-old girl participate in the first batch of exploration missions. After a final vote, they still let her go. The reason was that a 12-year-old girl was easier to make people lower their guard in certain aspects. Furthermore, Mumai was not an ordinary little girl, she was a new-formed Kabanrai warrior. As for humanitarian issues, Kongming had mentioned them, but they were clearly not given importance by others. After all, she was just another worlder. This world also has monsters. And that blade-wielding young man's swordsmanship. Kongming was surprised and spoke first. As the military representative here, he was clearly more concerned about these potentially dangerous otherworld existences. Strange, too strange. That young man's performance in all aspects clearly hasn't reached the level of a sword master, so why can he unleash Swordora? However, immediately, all the chairman, vice-chairman, and personnel within the command center were astonished by the white demon's extremely strong limb self-healing ability. Limbs that were cut off could immediately grow new ones. Even being shot through the abdomen with a gun could recover in an instant. When Mumai, under Lucci's order, first struck through the white demon's heart and head, and saw that it was still unharmed, the entire place suddenly fell silent. What kind of thing was this? If this white demon had displayed some kind of superpower, they might not have been so shocked, but this self-healing regeneration ability, which was close to immortality, was different. This kind of thing couldn't even be done by people who had mastered Life Return or Zone Awakened users. Capture it alive. Chief of Staff Fernandez slammed the meeting table and stood up abruptly, staring excitedly at the white demon on the virtual screen. We must send it to the Biochemical Research Institute to research the secret of its self-healing regeneration ability. This way, we won't be troubled by disabilities anymore. However, the subsequent development greatly angered him. Lucci actually ordered Mumai to kill the white demon with that niche iron blade. What is he doing? Doesn't he understand the value of this monster? Please don't rush, I have a feeling that this kind of monster called demon shouldn't be the only one. Vice Chairman Marlon Wilfred, formerly the Vice Minister of the Finance Department, who was sitting on the right side of the meeting table, advised. Moreover, since it can be killed, it indicates that it still has significant flaws itself. Next, through the perspective of the visual Denden Mushi in Lucci's hand, Mumai and Gu Shiwen were seen walking under a large tree and starting to talk. It was mainly Gu Shiwen speaking, and Mumai listening. Their dialogue was first transmitted from Mumai's earphone to the earphone that Lucci had intentionally placed near the transponder snail. From there, it was transmitted by the transponder snail to the transponder snail placed within the Stargate camp in the Sea of Trees, and finally reached the command center on the Sea Star mainland along the thick, long black line. Listen up, cough cough. So-called demons are man-eating demons. They are terrifying monsters created by the demon progenitor Miznkibutsuji 1,000 years ago. Their physical ability is very strong. Both their strength and speed far exceed humans, and their muscle density is relatively high. Ordinary blades cannot cause damage at all. The most troublesome thing, as you saw before, is that they possess the self-healing ability to change their form at will and easily recover their body. It is said that some demons also possess a certain superpower called blood demon art, although I haven't seen it yet. Chapter 297, Specialty Resources and Non-Specialty Resources. At this moment, Mumai asked curiously. So their weakness is the niche iron blade in your hand? You don't even know that? Alright, don't be angry. Gu Shiwen looked at Mumai in shock, but seeing the cute girl puff out her cheeks and glare at him, he quickly waved his hands and continued to explain. Strictly speaking, the niche iron blade cannot be considered a weakness. It only temporarily suppresses the demon's healing speed because it absorbs sunlight energy. So, as long as you cut off their heads, they will completely die because they cannot recover in time. In other words, the sun is the true natural enemy of these demons. While listening, Mumai examined the katana in her hand, which had many purple patterns on its blade. For some reason, she always had a sense of familiar déjà vu. Kabanrai world and man-eating demon. A Kabanrai world's heart can be easily pierced by a blade attached with a Kabanrai world heart membrane, and these demons can also be easily killed with special blades. Are there many of these demons? I'm not sure about that, but there shouldn't be few, because I heard my teacher say the Demon Slayer Corps has several hundred people. Gu Shiwen said with emotion. Oh right, you're also participating in the final assessment, aren't you? Let's rest in this village for a night and go together tomorrow. The youth did not hide the anticipation in his gaze, staring intently at Mumai's amber eyes, waiting for an answer, which made Mumai feel a bit uncomfortable. The key thing is that she already had someone in her heart, even though she was only 12 years old this year. Mumai, agree to him. Find out the situation of the Demon Slayer Corps. I will follow you in the shadows. Alright, Captain Rasky had spoken, so Mumai could only nod and accept his invitation under Gushaiwan's increasingly surprised gaze. Alright, it just so happens that I can't quite remember the route my teacher told me, and I even brought the wrong blade. Saying that, Mumai first returned an Ichiran blade to the other party, then hung the steam gun on her waist, and casually took down the short sword from her back. With a light sing sound, the short sword's blade was drawn out halfway. Look. Gushaiwan took a closer look and found that there were no strange patterns on this blade, indicating it was just an ordinary short sword. Now he understood a bit. Perhaps the girl was careless when she left and mistook this blade for an Ichiran blade, which is why she didn't use a blade against that white demon earlier. As you know, the time for the final assessment is approaching, and there's no time to go back and switch. Mumai said with a hopeless expression. So that's it. It's alright, as long as we act together, then you can also use this blade. It's just that I don't know what the content of the assessment is. It would be bad if we get separated then. Meanwhile, Captain Rasky in the shadows began to notify the other exploration teams about the demons, the Demon Slayer Corps, and the Nichiren Blade, so they would be prepared if they encountered demons. At the same time, one by one, Cypher Paul member disguised as ordinary people mixed into various cities and towns. Everyone was using various methods to collect intelligence about this country and world. Those teams in the large cities even bought several issues of Stop newspaper, then found a deserted place, and transmitted them back to the command center using visual dendenmushi. The Other World Strategy Committee immediately gathered a group of department official and scientists to sort out and research the content on these newspaper. They found that what was mentioned most in the newspaper was about Emperor Meiji passing away on July 30th, Meiji 45, Western calendar 1912, the 123rd Emperor Taisho ascending the throne, with the era name Taisho. Looking at the date of the latest issue, it was now Taisho 2, Western calendar 1913. There was also a lot of content about the Meiji Restoration and matters concerning the so-called European continent nations, such as the Austro-Hungarian Empire, the German Empire, the British Empire, the United States of America, the Russian Empire, and so on. It must be said, newspapers are really good things. They provided the world government with a massive amount of intelligence, so much so that due to the excessive information, for a while, they could only classify and organize it. It will take some time to fully digest it. And this also made everyone realize that the difficulty of this world conquest would be much greater than the previous Kabanrai world, by who knows how many times. They are facing a complete world with a population of billions. In the high altitude several thousand meters above. A several dozen kilometer long, white-based with gold patterns, giant ship named Noah's Ark was slowly flying above the sea area of the first half of the Grand Line. Demon Slayer Corps, Nichiren Blade. Im had returned to his room. He naturally received the relevant intelligence explored in the other world immediately. The moment he saw these images, text, and footage, many memories began to surface in his mind. After Iron Fortress's Kabanrai, is it Demon Slayer, Kaimetsu no Iba? They really are all Japanese anime and manga world. Now it could basically be completely confirmed. He was seen lying on a beach chair basking in the sunlight. Not far away stood 9 Kuja guards holding bows and standing guard. Stussy, wearing a bikini in the pool, was elegantly playing in the water, desperately showing off her figure and smile. Unfortunately, Im's thoughts were currently focused on the Demon Slayer world. He was thinking about the value and resources of this world. Fortunately, with his current brain thinking speed, no matter what he thought about, the efficiency was very high. Before long, he had a rough train of thought. First of all, he divided the resources of these other worlds into 2 categories, one category called specialty product, meaning things only found in that world, and the other category called non-specialty, meaning things also found in other worlds. Just like the Kabanrai world, its specialty resources are Kabanrai world, the Mklachi high-pressure special steam boiler, and jet bullet. And its non-specialty resources are iron armored train, mortar, wired telephone, cannon, sword forging technology, and so on. As for the Demon Slayer world, its specialty resources are much richer. Like the Kabanrai world, the man-eating demon themselves are. Then there's the Nichiren Blade as well as its main materials, scarlet crimson sand iron and scarlet crimson ore. This kind of minerals that can absorb sunlight most likely has special effectiveness against the so-called dark creatures. Besides that, the Demon Slayer core breathing style and accompanying sword techniques are also. Going a bit deeper, people with special constitution also count. For example, the future sight ability possessed by the successive heads of the Yubu Yashiki family, the current head of the Demon Slayer Corps. His kind of future sight is different from the future sight in the Sea Star world. The latter can see what will happen a few seconds later and is controllable, while the former can see footage of a certain point in time within a year but is difficult to control. Speaking of which, the biggest local specialty of this world is that Mizankibatsuji, a guy who is 100 or 200 years older than me. Him is quite interested in this super coward. The reason he's called a coward is because after this demon progenitor was brutally defeated by Yoriichi Tsujikuni, he actually just became a shrinking turtle, hiding until the latter died of old age before daring to come out and act. This is similar to his former Imu, their methods seem similar, both hid behind the scenes for hundreds of years. But the latter was because he didn't want to go out, while Mizan didn't dare to go out. In short, this is a 1,000-year-old coward whose mind is only focused on living for the sake of living, satisfied as long as he doesn't die. Getting back to the topic. Im actually felt that in terms of value to the world government, the non-specialty resources in the Demon Slayer world are not much lower than these specialty resources. One must know that this world is at the time point 1 year before the First World War. Europa and the United States of America have mature modern science and technology industry and a large number of scientists in various fields. Overall, the Demon Slayer world is definitely a great treasure. Chapter 298, The Fourth Seven Warlords of the Sea? A major issue currently facing him was whether to reveal the intelligence he knew to the Five Elders in advance. When conquering the Kubanari world back then, the goal was to allow his subordinates to explore on their own, increasing their experience in all aspects of other world conquest. That's not right. The Kubanari world is not a complete civilization. The conquest experience gained there is difficult to apply to the Demon Slayer world. Therefore, the current world government is actually still lacking in this regard. Thinking of this, Im temporarily dismissed the idea. In his view, the Kubanari world could only be considered a beginner's tutorial for the world government, while the Demon Slayer world was the first matchmaking mode they would face. Only after winning this other world war would their conquest experience be considered complete. Subsequently, when encountering familiar worlds, he would need to utilize his profitability to increase efficiency. Having made his decision, Im no longer thought much about the Demon Slayer world, although he still wanted to see Mezan with his own eyes. After all, this kind of cowardly and cautious world's strongest was quite rare. In other worlds, weren't all bosses with combat power at the power ceiling arrogant, domineering, and full of ambition? That's why Mizan Kibatsuji was truly special, quite interesting. Tesoro became a gold fruit ability user? He had just put down the report about the second other world and picked up the next document. On it was a picture of Tesoro manipulating gold, followed by a brief written description below. He had originally thought that these people's fate would change under his influence, and everything would develop in different directions. But now it seemed some matters would still proceed as usual. Although there was also the conjecture that devil fruits would find suitable masters on their own, seeing it actually happen before his eyes still surprised him. If that's the case, then this kid can't be underestimated anymore. Just as he had thought before, Im had previously believed that the Gold Emperor wouldn't appear, so he had always regarded Tesoro as merely an entertainer, occasionally having him sing songs from the past or something similar for him. But now he had eaten the gold fruit. What did the Gold Emperor represent? Earning 20% of the world's wealth by building the most luxurious and largest entertainment cruise ship. Possessing highest combat power comparable to a marine admiral. Although without that deeply painful experience, it might affect his desire for strength, at least he truly had the potential and possibility to grow strong. This was enough for him to increase his attention on Tesoro, his investment in him, and his cultivation of him. Then guide him to start a business and open his own company, but it must be limited to the scope of the entertainment industry. The world government will fund him with an initial sum of gold and an ordinary cruise ship through investment. Oh, and also arrange for people to train his martial arts. Im wrote down his thoughts one by one below the document. This was actually a concrete manifestation of authority. Speaking of which, I should find some time to meet with him. There are only 7 warlords of the sea so far. With Tesoro's Gold Emperor aptitude and money-making skill, he is completely qualified to obtain a position. Gold. Oh, that's right. A flash of inspiration struck him, and he quickly added a sentence below the document. Order Guild Tesoro and Stella to board the ship and follow as soon as possible. Yes. He planned to keep this kid by his side for the next period, because he would definitely need his ability later, and incidentally, have him sing and dance for him. As for Stella. After all, they were a couple, and he heard they were completely inseparable. There was no need to force them apart. It was just that her job as a reporter would have to be temporarily suspended. Keeping an idle person on such a large Noah's Ark was nothing. Looking at the next report. This time, it was a report regarding Wano country. It said that during the pursuit by the Marines and Ninja, Kazuki Oden's remaining 3 vessels, Denjiro, Ashuradoji, and Kawamatsu, jumped down a waterfall and fled into the deep sea, disappearing under the desperate cover of the remaining rebellious samurai. At the same time, these samurai, who were die-hard loyalists of the Kazuki family and other daimyo families, were massacred under Mihawk's order. From then on, after the 3 massacres by Burned Eye World, Kaido, and this recent one, these stubborn elements were basically cleared out. Mihawk did very well in this regard. Im showed a satisfied smile and casually put it down. As for those 3 Odin vassals, they were not worth mentioning. It would be fine if they lived in anonymity and hid honestly for the rest of their lives, but if they dared to show their face again, they would certainly die. Continuing to look at the document, he had to admit that even after heavy screening by the 5 elders, there were still many reports reaching his hands. After all, the scale of the world government was immense. Im didn't mind the trouble, instead, he enjoyed it. As he said before, no one would dislike the feeling of having great authority in hand. The Marines had already moved most of the criminals with a bounty of less than 100 million from the underground levels 1, 2, 3, and 4 of Impel down to Tequila Wolf in the East Blue, the bridge on the sea. This long-term mission was finally completed. Seeing this, he was filled with emotion, thinking to himself, the Marines have really worked hard this year. As for why it was most, that was because the Biochemical Research Institute located on level 5.5 of Impel Down had specifically requested to keep some as experiment materials. Otherwise, using pirates with bounties over 100 million for experiments would be a bit too luxurious and wasteful. Next, there was also a report about Sakazuki helping Vegapunk and the Academy of Science create a dormant active volcano in the future kingdom that always had magma but would never erupt. According to him, the difficulty was actually not small, it could be considered technical work. His true value was finally reflected now, an infinite geothermal energy producer. Honestly, if the master of this mag fruit wasn't named Sakazuki, Im would seriously consider transferring him to the rear, specifically responsible for energy development work. Side effects after Kurisu from the Kabanrai world consumed the Parimshis system scythe fruit ability. The content of this document was even more interesting. Im picked up the wine glass on the coffee table, took a sip of the mellow red wine, and read the content above with great interest. TSK, as expected, devil fruits were indeed tailor-made for beings of the sea. It was precisely to verify this point that he had specifically sent a Parimshis system fruit over back then, rather than an animal system fruit which could enhance physique. Of course, this would screw over Kurisu, but so what? After all, allowing him to eat a devil fruit was already a type of grace. 10 minutes later, Im finally finished reading all the documents and wrote his instructions on them, thereby influencing the operation of the entire world. Gently putting down the blue gold pen in his hand, he sat in his chair without any movement. The enma placed on the sword stand not far away automatically flew into his hand. This was also a method of using God's domain. The essence of the so-called hockey was the materialization of mental power. At his realm, it was basically no different from psychokinesis. Whoosh! Im took a deep breath. He was preparing to explore hell. Actually, with his cautious personality, he didn't really want to enter the completely unknown and certainly dangerous soul domain alone. But the problem was that currently, no one could scout for him, and to break through his current combat power limit, he had to go. Helpless, he could only take the adventure. It seems even a planet master can't avoid such moments. The next moment, along with the sound of a sword being drawn, Im slowly closed his eyes. Chapter 299, Im's Journey to Hell. A sky as crimson as blood or fire, a ground of sand like carbon or black rice, coupled with a purplish mist in the void, the scorching temperature, and the pungent smell of sulfur. As soon as Im appeared, he felt distinctly uncomfortable. Strictly speaking, this was actually his second time here. But the previous time, facing King Yama, all his attention was focused on the other party. Therefore, he didn't pay much attention to the environment. However, after attaching hockey to his body surface, the scorching feeling disappeared. According to what the other party said, this place was Yami Hirazaka. Compared to the Sea Star human world, it was like Wano country, but the problem was that Noah's Ark had already left the New World Sea area. This phenomenon was indeed quite magical. So what should he do now? Which direction should he go? I should have gotten a map earlier. Thinking this to himself, Im held the enma scabbard and, following his sixth sense, slowly walked in one direction, looking completely resigned to fate. Honestly, this experience of walking alone with a blade in the wilderness for exploration was quite novel, filling him with gradual excitement. This was the normal beginning for a transmigrator. So hell has trees too? Im looked at the few withered trees that indeed stood on the desolate plain, pricking his tongue in wonder. Everything he saw now was fresh. Just as he was wondering why this hell was so empty, a towering red pillar appeared at the other end of his gaze. That is. As Im got a little closer, he suddenly realized that it was a red torii estimated to be nearly 1,000 meters high, which represented the gate separating the divine person and human world. He saw large numbers of translucent figures pouring out from that red gate, some walking in, some floating in from above, and even more above that, layer upon layer. As soon as they appeared, under the gaze of two purple-robed skeletons holding large scythes, they automatically joined an endless queue. From Im's perspective, he couldn't see how many long queues there were. Counting upwards from the ground queue, there were 18 layers in total. The scene was indeed spectacular, even making one wonder if so many people died in the sea star world every day. So the previous skeleton wasn't in his main body. Im thought about it and didn't find it strange. It was normal for these god-level great gods to like possessing others. However, with this, he also understood how to proceed next. He didn't continue to approach but instead pulled back some distance, though his direction was the same as the long queues. As he walked, he became a little impatient. Such a desolate environment became very boring once the novelty wore off, causing him to start speeding up. He didn't know how much time had passed or how far he had walked until a dark yellow river and an ancient bridge connecting the two ends appeared before his eyes. Only then did Im stop his high-speed movement. Not only that. With his eyesight, he could see some house-like scenes appearing in the distance on the other side of the river. But Im's gaze was focused on the woman standing on the bridge, facing sideways to him, seemingly observing the river surface. She was wearing a kimono similar in color to the river water, holding a paper umbrella that looked like it was made of white paper resting on her shoulder, and her figure was quite graceful. At this moment, the other party seemed to have noticed him as well, slowly turning around to reveal her gentle face and soft eyes. "Mister must be new to this underworld, right?" "Oh? How can you tell?" Im asked, looking at this yellow-clad beauty with interest. "Because the scent on your body is very fresh. This humble one can barely smell any underworld energy." Although he didn't know what the woman meant by underworld energy, he didn't deny anything. Seeing the other party start walking towards him step by step with curiosity, as if attracted by his scent, the corner of Im's mouth curled up slightly. Finally, things are getting interesting. But with this strong malice and greed, are you sure you want to sneak attack? As his words left his mouth, the woman instantly stopped, clearly stunned, but her gentle gaze immediately turned cold and ruthless. "Oh, she should be called a female demon. I didn't expect you to have perception-based abilities. This is no fun anymore. I originally wanted to play with you." Im, however, smiled and said, "But I have several matters I'd like to ask you about. How about we chat? Ask me inside my belly." The yellow-clad female demon's expression suddenly turned ferocious. The paper umbrella in her hand flew out, and when it reached 12 meters high in the sky, it spun rapidly like a top. Whoosh 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 whoosh. In an instant, dense dark yellow water droplets splashed out like heavy rain. At the same time, wisps of yellow mist also spread in the court. Soon, a withered tree was completely swallowed by the mist before Im's eyes, and the ground in front of him was corroded into deep holes by the falling water droplets. "Oh, it's like sulfuric acid." Im thought this to himself. He then glanced at the river not far away and said, "It seems your ability is to control some of the yummy water." Seeing that he had no intention of dodging at all, the female demon grinned maliciously, but before she could say anything, her expression froze. How? How is that possible? All the rain droplets and mist were blocked by an invisible chi wall about 10 meters away from him. At this point, she completely realized that she had provoked a monster. "Alright, let me see what you know." Suddenly, Im's figure instantly appeared in front of the female demon, while the figure behind him dissipated like an illusion in the wind. Not good. The female demon's face changed drastically, her thin eyebrows furrowed tightly, and the unease in her heart surged throughout her body like bone-chilling coldness. But just as she was about to summon her paper umbrella to protect herself, she found that the umbrella in the sky had been split in half and was turning into flying ash and disappearing. Bang! The next moment, the female demon's neck was tightly gripped by Im's right palm. When her terrified gaze met the latter's golden ripple eyes, she felt her entire body seized by extreme fear and intimidation, completely unable to move. Immediately after, while Im questioned the other party, he also browsed what the other party was thinking subconsciously. This ability to read the other party's inner thoughts through contact was one of the special abilities of his observation hockey. Originally, he just tried it out of curiosity. After all, the target had changed from a person to a demon, but judging from the current effect, there was no impact. This should be related to the fact that demons also have a heart. "Oh, so you are the legendary Rain Woman." Through the inner thoughts of this female demon, Im's understanding of Inma's hell began to rapidly increase. These unruly demons were the evil ghosts King Yama spoke of. For example, Bone Woman, Snow Woman, Needle Woman, Two-Mouthed Woman, and so on, who specialized in devouring the souls of the civilians in hell. The village behind the bridge had been completely eaten by this rain woman. The so-called civilians were souls temporarily living here while waiting for reincarnation. This waiting process was often very long because there were countless demons queuing ahead. So they spontaneously gathered together to form villages and towns, and even married and had children. Even though the souls in that village were eaten by this rain woman, it wouldn't take long for it to be filled again, as the houses were already there. And this rain woman couldn't stay here forever either, because the jailers would come to check the situation. Amazing, this underworld is truly a civilization world. Im got everything he wanted, then used hockey to tear the rain woman in his hand into pieces. Immediately, a ball of eerie blue flame appeared in front of him. With the information provided by the rain woman, he knew this was the key to increasing his soul strength. A high-concentration spirit particle aggregate. He didn't hesitate at all, directly cupped it with his palm, and then sent it into his mouth. Boom, instantly, Golden Conqueror's hockey, like a sun, erupted from Im's body like a tsunami. Chapter 300, Breaking Through the Limit of Hockey. Boom, the suddenly erupting hockey was like a gale sweeping away everything loose in the room. Documents, wine glasses, coffee tables, carpets. Even the ground and walls instantly cracked extensively from the shock. As it spread through layers of walls to the outside, the affected Kuja guards didn't even have a chance to react, their eyes rolling back as they collapsed onto the ground. "What's going on?" Stussy exclaimed. She had just returned to her room, showered, and changed into a black dress and stockings. Because she had avoided the initial mental impact and was further away, she could still maintain her self-awareness, though a chill ran through her heart. At the same time, a large number of whistling sounds announced the arrival of black after-images, all of them experts from Cypher Paul. Immediately after, heavy footsteps announced the arrival of the giant god soldiers, accompanied by a large number of Holy Land garrison. But even though they arrived, they could only watch helplessly, as the wave-like aura was truly terrifying, and no one could get close. Fortunately, after observation, it seemed it wasn't an attack. Soon, the Conqueror's hockey that startled the entire Noah's Ark gradually dissipated. Just as Stussy and the others were about to go in and check, a faint voice came out. "It's nothing, disperse." The people outside exchanged confused gazes, then followed the order to return, leaving only Stussy in the court to continue waiting. Inside the room, Im, who was sitting cross-legged on the chair, had opened his eyes. In his hand, he still held the purple gold long saber with half of its blade drawn. His gaze, however, was scanning the messy environment around him. This feeling. Suddenly, he felt many voices. These voices were strong and weak, the loudest coming from the sharp swords hanging on the sword stand. But these voices were truly just voices, containing no understandable intelligence. Except for this. Im's gaze returned to Inma, because he heard a breathing sound on this blade. It seemed to have its own life. No. Perhaps it was consciousness? This should be the ability to hear the voice of all things, but what's going on with this blade? Hidden Rain Village Nohaba Hidden Mist Village and Shujui, also among the 21 great grade swords, did not have such emotionally rich voices. Im tried to communicate with it but received no reaction. Perhaps it's because of hell. Lacking intelligence, Im was helpless and could only sheath the blade. He began to observe his hockey. After dealing with the Rain Woman at that time, he successively encountered various yokai such as Aondan, who could control underworld fire candles, Needle Woman with hair like needles, and Two-Mouthed Woman with a second mouth growing on her head. Also, it turned out that the so-called Rain Woman and Needle Woman were not single individuals but types of yokai, just like he later encountered several Rain Women of different strengths. It seemed these Rain Women liked to stay in places with rivers. By devouring their spirit particles, his own soul received a certain degree of improvement. However, because the quantity was still too small, coupled with insufficient understanding of the soul, he couldn't feel exactly how much it had improved. But his hockey attainment had indeed reached a certain realm. Im could clearly perceive that his hockey had truly broken through its original copy limit. It really is a slow process, but as long as it has an effect, that's good. No matter how clumsy the method, it's still a method. At the same time, in Wano country, a flying warship arrived above the port of Ringo. This place had been sealed off by a large number of ninja, and the high points on the nearby mountain slope were also occupied by ninja. Interestingly, they had unified the color of their attire, and even the katana on their backs, to black, and tied headbands printed with a 5-circle cross emblem on their foreheads. It must be said, with this change of attire, they certainly looked the part, at least more capable and professional. When this warship slowly descended from the air, only 4 or 5 meters above the ground, the Marines on board pushed down long wooden boards. Immediately after, teams of Navy soldiers ran down to guard the surroundings, as if confronting the ninja, which made the atmosphere somewhat strange. Until a burly rear admiral walked down, first scanning the ninja in the court, then looking at Fukurokuju, who was dressed differently and had a peculiar skull. This former commander of the Mimawari, now the first-generation Sikage of Sea Ninja Village, wore a black ninja uniform underneath and a long-sleeved divine robe outside. This divine robe was entirely black, with a circle of deep blue ukiyo-e-style water wave patterns on the hem and cuffs, and the words First-Generation Sikage written in light blue calligraphy on the back. Behind Fukurekaju, the former Mimawari-me's Fukurekaju and Hotei followed, serving as royal guard, and they wore a thick black alias on their upper bodies. Onigamo walked up to Fukurekaju with a chuckle. "You must be the Sikage, correct?" "That's right. You just need to hand the prisoners over to us, and the following matters will be handled by us Sea Ninja," Fukurekaju said seriously. "All right then." Onigamo pondered for a moment before agreeing. After all, the order was indeed for them to hand them over to the ninja. It was just that there wasn't a single marine officer present, which gave him a feeling of unreliability. Soon, about 40 to 50 people in kimono, gagged and with their hands cuffed, disembarked the warship urged by the marine soldiers. Some of their gazes were numb, some were still filled with fear, and others were seething with anger. Onigamo, as a rear admiral, had already learned about the Stargate and other world matters, and knew that these people were from Kabanrai world. It was said they were stubborn elements unwilling to submit to the rule of the world government, including high officials from the former Hinamoto shogunate, as well as samurai and soldiers. As for why they were brought here, that was unclear, but it probably wasn't for anything good. "Thank you for your trouble. You can head to Flower Capital, food and residence have been prepared there," Fukurekaju said very politely. Onigamo naturally had no objection. After completing the handover of all the prisoners, he departed by warship. Fukurekaju's expression, however, suddenly turned cold. "All right, take them to White Mountain." "Yes." Fukurekaju, who had waist-length fluffy red hair, immediately responded. Actually, for such a simple matter, Fukurekaju, as the Sikage, didn't need to come personally, but as the only person in Sea Ninja Village who had been revealed otherworld intelligence, he was somewhat curious. Looking now, their aura was indeed very weak, even the strong adult men were only about as strong as 11 or 12-year-old children. The so-called White Mountain refers to the 3 adjacent mountain peaks on the easternmost side of Hikamei. There is also a Red Gate Torii at the foot of the mountain, and there used to be 2 villages nearby. But they have now been relocated near Abisu town, because this place will be used as an execution ground. Logically, Ringo had a graveyard, which should be more suitable as an execution ground, since they could just bury the executed there. But in Fukurekaju's view, Toko Cemetery was the resting place for the people of Wano country. How could these otherworlders be qualified to die there? Therefore, he made a suggestion to Mihawk to set the execution ground here. At this time, 52 Kabanrai world criminals who had came to such a distant place by airship through the Stargate were kneeling on the ground in a line. In front of them were the 3 mountain peaks and the Torii Red Gate, and behind them stood a black-clad ninja holding a katana. If someone possessed the spirit eye, they should be able to see a team of jailers quietly waiting in hell opposite the Torii. Time is up. Sikage Fukurekaju glanced at the sun in the sky, and his raised right hand instantly fell. Execute. Chapter 301, 6th Update. Mount Fujikasane discovered. Rain came without a trace and left without a sign. A young boy and girl walked on the mountain path washed by the rain. The dew on the leaves, the puddles on the ground, the thin mist on the distant high mountains, and the fresh water vapor at the tip of the nose, all of this was like a beautiful landscape painting, silently baptizing one's inner self. "Haven't we arrived yet?" Mumai walked with her hands behind her back, skipping along. Her pair of beautiful amber-like pupils admired the mountain scenery around them. Since leaving that village, they had walked for nearly 2 days. They encountered another village along the way, but Gushaiwan, citing limited time, only purchased some food and fresh water. "It should be soon. Actually, this is my first time too." The boy felt a little unsure when asked, but fortunately, a hint of purple appeared at the end of his sight, bringing a happy smile to his face. "Look quickly. It's wisteria trees." As the two approached the forest where a large number of wisteria flowers were blooming, Mumai was immediately astonished by the magnificent and spectacular sight. She murmured, "It's really beautiful." At the same time, she thought to herself, when the world government conquers this world someday, she would bring Ikuma here for a visit. Meanwhile, Gushaiwan, unaware that the girl already had someone in her heart, still said excitedly with a smile, "Master told me that as long as you see wisteria flowers, you've reached the place for the final selection." Mumai nodded noncommittally. In the past 2 days, she had learned a lot about the Demon Slayer core, breathing styles, and those peculiar sword techniques from this simple boy. He answered everything she asked, being very honest, but occasionally looked at her with a surprised gaze, as if thinking, "How do you not even know this?" Fortunately, Her previous life-saving grace and her far beyond ordinary skills did not arouse too much suspicion from him. There was also a troublesome point. She had to avoid him when drinking the blood she carried with her, and occasionally pretending to eat some normal food. The rest of the path was a bit steep. It was basically climbing a mountain. When they followed the stone steps to the top, they saw two large red pillars standing there. They looked somewhat like torii pillars, but not a complete torii. There are so many people. Gushaiwan sighed as he looked at the 20 to 30 peers inside the court. These were all opponents, and everyone looked very strong. Mumai, after scanning the area, thought, indeed, when these people aren't actively using that breathing style, their aura is similar to that of ordinary adults. Because her new form greatly enhanced her perception and spirit, she easily mastered observation Haki during her training at Cypherpol headquarters. As for armament Haki, it was much more difficult because it was directly linked to physical strength and will. Finally, Mumai's gaze passed through figure after figure, stopping at two short-haired girls in deep purple kimonos at the other end. Their hair colors were black and white respectively, and they stood gracefully between the two red pillars, with their backs to the wisteria flower curtain. This was because only these two girls were not carrying personal swords, and their eyes were very peculiar. The purple irises were very large, almost occupying 2/3 of their eyes, while the pupils were white, like the sclera at the edge, making them look very strange. At the same time, not far away, a boy's nose suddenly twitched. He subconsciously sniffed, then his gaze followed the scent and located Mumai. The smell of human blood, very faint, but not the aura of a demon. This boy had a clear burn scar on his left forehead, a white and red fox mask hanging behind his head, earrings with a sunwheel pattern on his ears, and wore a blue short jacket with white cloud patterns. He carried a niche iron blade with a black scabbard and white hilt at his waist. This was the protagonist of this world, Komodo Tanjiro. His naturally extraordinary acute sense of smell could not only easily distinguish any scent but also use it to smell people's emotions, differentiate between humans and demons, and even identify the thread of vulnerability containing the opponent's weakness scent during combat. It was truly outrageous. Naturally, he could also smell the human blood in the small bottle on Mumai. Just as Mumai was looking at the two purple-clad girls and Tanjiro was looking at Mumai, the two purple-clad girls spoke in unison, attracting the gaze of all the boys and girls in the court to themselves. Everyone. Very much thank you for participating in the Demon Slayer Corps final selection tonight. Following that, they began speaking one sentence each. The white-haired girl maintained a smile and said, "This Mount Fujikasane holds many demons that the Demon Slayer Corps swordsman lords have captured alive. They cannot leave." The black-haired girl maintained a smile and said, "This is because wisteria flowers, which demons dislike, bloom year-round from the foot of the mountain to the middle section." The white-haired girl maintained a smile and said again, "However, from here onwards, there are no wisteria flowers in the areas behind, so demons will appear." Following that, the black-haired girl continued, "Please survive here for 7 days. This is the passing condition for the final selection." After speaking, the two bowed together and said in unison, "Now then, please go safely." The atmosphere in the court had already reached highest point with their words, and the expressions of every boy and girl became serious. Mumai was the same. She hadn't expected there to be so many monsters here that couldn't be killed without a niche iron blade. "Mumai-chan, they didn't say we can't team up. Let's stick together later." Gushaiwan also thought of her situation without a niche iron blade. "Okay." At this moment, Mumai wasn't being coy and agreed without hesitation, saying, "I'll suppress those demons, and you do the killing." As the figures of the two purple-clad girls walked away, the boys and girls in the court also began to move. Some rushed forward alone with great excitement, while others gathered together in 2s and 3s. At the same time, on the trunk of a wisteria tree not far away, Lucci heard everything through Mumai's earphone and began recording the position on the map he had temporarily drawn over the past few days. He had already received the order to capture alive a demon. Now it seemed he would exceed the requirement, because the demons in this Mount Fujikasane already belong to the world government. In the evening, just as Mumai followed Gushaiwan to begin the final assessment, the other World Strategy Committee on the Sea Star mainland also received Lucci's live broadcast report. Upon hearing about the situation at Mount Fujikasane, everyone in the command center was beaming with joy. He, the Demon Slayer Corps actually did a good deed. Excellent, excellent. Chairman Fernandez spread his palm and praised greatly. "I think we can send more personnel to that Mount Fujikasane to capture all those demons and hand them over to the Biochemical Research Institute." Vice Chairman Hobson Samuel, formerly Vice Minister of the Ministry of Justice, suggested. The demons' exaggerated self-healing ability was simply too appealing. After all, no one could guarantee that their own body wouldn't be incomplete. "No rush." Kong Ming, hearing his words, quickly stopped him by raising his feather fan. Mount Fuji-san and the demons inside are right there, there's no need to be so hasty. Let Mumai pass this final assessment first, then infiltrate the Demon Slayer Corps. At the very least, we need to figure out where their headquarters is. Vice Chairman Marlon Wilfred, formerly Vice Minister of the Finance Department, agreed. Indeed, breathing styles, accompanying sword techniques, and that thing called niche iron blade are all good things. Let's learn more about the Demon Slayer Corps situation first. Chairman, Mumai has started the live broadcast. Suddenly, a technician behind the control panel in front reported loudly, which made the 5 chairmen and vice chairmen at the meeting table perked up. Hey, Mumai-chan, what's this, a snail? Inside Mount Fuji-san, not long after Gu Shiwen started walking, he noticed Mumai taking a small creature out of her pocket and placing it on her shoulder. Its pair of small eyes began slowly scanning the surroundings. The latter, however, smiled nonchalantly and said, "Yes, its name is Dummy, it's my pet. It was sleeping before, now I'm letting it get some air. But we're about to face demons, aren't you afraid it? It's okay, you know, I'm very strong." Chapter 302, Is Mizan stronger than him? The matter of Mumai participating in the Demon Slayer Corps final selection at Mount Fuji-san received high attention from the Otherworld Strategy Committee, and was also given importance by Holy Land Mary Ejos. At this moment, taking advantage of the blind spot that no one in the Demon Slayer world recognized transponder snails, the real-time screen feed she captured from the live broadcast also appeared inside the Room of Authority. Specifically, before the 5 elders. In the virtual screen midair, Mumai and Gu Shiwen could be seen fiercely engaging with the attacking demons among the dark mountain forest, with the night sky's moonlight as the backdrop. However, this was also related to Mumai not using her full strength. As a Kobanrai in new form, her strongest combat methods were the various uses of black mucus and mental energy bullets. But in order to smoothly infiltrate the interior of the Demon Slayer Corps, Mumai temporarily chose to keep a low profile. Fortunately, observation hockey is formless and colorless, so it could be used normally, which ensured her basic personal safety. Regarding these demons, everyone has their thoughts, right? Saint Topman Warcurry gazed fixedly at the screen feed of those demons casually regenerating their severed limbs and broken legs. According to the information revealed by this otherworld young man, these demons not only have super strong self-healing ability, but their lifespan is also nearly infinite. As long as they have food, they can keep living. Although it's unknown if there are any other side effects besides fearing sunlight, but at least they have the chance to keep living. This is what he wanted to say. After all, his own age was not young anymore. Everyone else present understood this logic, even the youngest Saint Shepherd Jupiter. This old man is more concerned about that Mizan Kibutsuji. He has lived for 1,000 years until now. Who knows how strong he is? Saint Jaga Ursha Saturn, holding the Shodai Kaitetsu, pushed up the glasses on his nose, his tone seeming very heavy. As expected, these words made the other 4 people become solemn. From their perspective, even Lord Amu, who is strong, is only over 800 years old. Therefore, they had every reason to suspect that the strength of this progenitor of demons might be even stronger. Then this is big trouble. 1 or 2 admiral-level combat power won't be enough. This old man suggests sending more exploration personnel to focus on collecting intelligence on this Mizan Kibutsuji. Temporarily halt the base construction on the other end of the Stargate. Saint Jaga Ursha Saturn, leaning on his cane and resting on the sofa, suggested. Indeed, if this Mizan is really that strong, then it is necessary to report to Lord Amu and be prepared to close the Stargate at any time. Saint Marcus Mars had very long legs, so he didn't like sitting. He could be seen echoing coldly with both hands in his pocket. No matter what, we cannot let the other party intrude into our homeland. Therefore, this old man suggests dispatching Bondi Werfa to be stationed at Stargate Base No. RL 1557. If this situation truly occurs, then let him go in and temporarily block Mizan, taking advantage of this time to close the Stargate. Wow, this was openly treating an army general as a sacrifice, but his suggestion received the approval of everyone present. Okay, then let's do this. Saint Topman Warcurry immediately hammered out the decision. It's just that when their ideas were reported to him on Noah's Ark, it made him feel amused and exasperated. What? Mizan is stronger than me? They were even prepared to sacrifice an admiral, just to buy time for myself to close the Stargate? And their basis for this is that Mizan's age is about 200 years older than mine? Well, without knowing the full story, just looking at the comparison of surface information, it seems to also have a certain logic. Forget it, forget it. By then they will all understand. Let them figure it out themselves. After all, it's better to handle the first match myself. I can't just randomly give them cheats. Sighed. It's just that in his heart, He also had some doubts. That is, this guy Mazen has Infinity Castle. If he gets scared later, it's very possible he will hide again and not show himself, hiding for a few hundred years or something. Then that would be very troublesome. It seems if I want to catch this coward, I really have to give my subordinates a slight advantage. But now I also don't have any clue. He remembers that in the canon manga, it was because that Nakaim acted foolishly. Surprisingly, while Mazen was severely injured, she actively sent the demon slayer Hashira and the protagonists into the Infinity Castle. From this point of view, Mazen's final cause of death was ultimately because he was screwed over by Nakaim. Therefore, to catch Mazen, either the position of Infinity Castle can be locked onto, or one must actively or passively enter the Infinity Castle. Infinity Castle is not another dimension, but rather a building that truly exists somewhere underground. Nakaim's blood demon art ability can only control its internal layout and teleport things. Logically speaking, in the final decisive battle, this Infinity Castle rushed out from underground to the surface. Then, as long as one knows the position of this place, it can be locked onto. The frustrating thing is that the manga didn't mention where the location of the decisive battle was. Only know that it's an urban area with a tower nearby. Hey, is the exciting part about to begin? At this moment, M was staying in the little garden inside the palace. Various kinds of green plants and fresh flowers were growing beside him, and under him was a comfortable lounge chair. In front of him, a virtual screen projected by a visual Denden Mushi was floating. The female lead of Kabanrai of the Iron Fortress participating in the final selection of Demon's Lair, Kaimetsu no Yaiba, TSK. This plot is much more interesting than a novel. M watched with great interest a large body-size man-eating demon appearing in the screen feed. He considered it deeply memorable. After all, it was the first small boss that the protagonist Danjiro encountered. Hand Demon. Its body is like a pile of yellowish-brown arms wrapped around each other, forming it. Even its vital point is wrapped and protected by a thick neck. The key is that it was imprisoned in this Mount Fujikasane for 47 years and ate over 50 examinees participating in the assessment. And demons, the more people they eat, the stronger they become, until they reach the upper limit of their potential. In the Demon Slayer world, Mumai, who was currently in Mount Fujikasane, was hiding in the dark spot of a large tree at this moment, squinting her eyes and observing this unusual large demon. And Gushaiwen beside her was already terrified, scared so much that he trembled all over, yet he didn't dare to speak out, for fear of attracting the hand demon's attention. How can there be this kind of monster here? How is this something that we can deal with? Ah. No. Outside the forest, the examinees being chased by the hand demon had already completely lost their sanity. Their courage was entirely gone, and they were frantically fleeing blindly. Before, some had tried to attack using breathing style and swordsmanship, but at most they severed one or two incoming arms. Then, they were grabbed by their limbs by even more hands that the demon itself split out and thrown into the hand demon's gaping maw. That is to say, if you cut one of the opponent's arms once, it will immediately turn into two relatively thinner arms. If you cut a few more times, then it will turn into 3, 4 arms. Is there anything more despairing than this? Yes, there is. At the beginning, these examinees, relying on their side having many people, thought of cooperation in combat. After the sacrifice of a few people, there was indeed a person who rushed behind the hand demon and then fiercely chopped at the wrapped arms on the back of its neck area with the niche iron blade in their hand. But who would have thought, only a crisp clang sound was heard, and the niche iron blade broke. That person also became a snack for the hand demon, delivered to its front by themselves. All of this was also witnessed by Mumai and Gushaiwen, who were hiding in the dark. In fact, if not for Mumai's appearance, Gushaiwen would likely also be one of the members being chased and killed. After all, in the canon manga, among the examinees who survived in the end, he was not included. Let's go, let's avoid it, Mumai said in a low voice. She actually thought about intervening to save those few examinees who were being chased and killed, but Captain Rasky had ordered her to hide her true strength as much as possible. After all, whether it was black mucus or mental energy bullet, they were all unexplainable abilities. Not to mention, she also needed to secretly drink human blood. Alright. Gushaiwen, of course, had no opinion. Instead, he nodded repeatedly, happily surprised. Swish, but just as the two were about to quietly leave, Mumai saw a streak of deep blue figure rush out from the forest in another direction, instantly severing a dark yellow arm that was about to swallow the last fleeing examinee. Instantly, putrid blood splattered. He is? Mumai looked in surprise at Tanjiro inside the court, holding a blade and facing the hand demon. Chapter 303, Jet Bullet vs. Hand Demon. That mask is the symbol, that fox mask. Is it called the exorcism mask? Just because they wore it, all of Urakadaki's disciples were eaten by me. They're all in my belly. So it's like Urakadaki killed them. Heh. Tanjiro's chest heaved violently with anger as he listened to the hand demon's mocking laughter, which suddenly erupted from his mouth as an ultimate roar. Mumai, hidden in the shadows, was instantly speechless seeing this scene. Could it be that this kid didn't see that the other party was deliberately provoking him? Or was it that the flesh-colored haired boy and the black-haired girl the hand demon mentioned earlier, who left the deepest impression on him, were very important people to him? What to do now? Mumai watched the blue-clothed boy waving his Nichiren blade, frantically cutting and slashing at the arms the hand demon shot towards him, looking like he was desperately trying to get closer to the opponent, and muttered to herself in a low voice. This. Gushaiwan thought she was speaking to him, which made him a little flustered. His survival instinct made him want to leave immediately with Mumai, but his moral burden prevented him from saying anything cold-blooded. What he didn't know was that Mumai was actually asking Captain Rasky, who was hidden in deeper shadows. You want to save him? Soon, a cold voice appeared in her earphone. Mumai stared at Tanjiro, who was increasingly disadvantaged in the court and beginning to resist with difficulty, gently nodded, and pursed her slightly nervous lips. I saw Ikuma in him. Ikuma is also that kind of big idiot who would desperately save people who have nothing to do with himself. If I say no, will you stand by and do nothing, turn around and leave? At the same time. Just then, with a muffled bang, Tanjiro not far away was immediately struck by boxing from one of the hand demon's arms. Crying out in pain, his entire body flew out and crashed heavily into a tree trunk. When he landed heavily, the fox mask he wore on his head shattered across the ground. A bleeding wound appeared on his forehead, staining half of it blood red. He seemed to have fainted, closing his eyes without any movement. On the other side, the cadet who had been saved by Tanjiro, seeing this scene, chose to abandon him. He thought to himself that he should quickly escape while the hand demon's attention was focused on his savior. Ah, that bastard. Gushaiwan gritted his teeth in anger at this sight. Although he also really wanted to run, suddenly he heard Mumai say in a deep voice, I won't. Huh? Gushaiwan turned his head in confusion, only to see the girl casually snatch the Nichiren blade from his hand, then transform into a pink afterimage and rush out, leaving only a sentence echoing in his ear. Lend me your blade, hide well. Hee. Inside the court, the hand demon walked up to Tanjiro, squinting its pale yellow demon eyes, grinning as it covered its mouth with two hands adorned with red fingernails, looking very excited. Urakadaki's brat is going to die again, thinking back to how that bastard caught it and brought it here, trapping it for nearly 50 years' time, its heart grew increasingly angry, but on the surface, it wore a wide grin. That guy, seeing his child can't return again, what kind of expression will he have? What kind of expression will he show? I really want to see it. I really want to see it. While laughing, it extended one of its many arms and slowly reached towards Tanjiro on the ground, anticipating in its heart what the taste of this little fox would be like. Swish, a streak of pink flashed past. The extended arm was severed in two by a single blade in the blink of an eye. Thick corrosive blood and the severed limb splattered across the ground. The hand demon was momentarily stunned by the sudden pain. The next moment, a short-haired girl in a pink short skirt, possessing extremely high cuteness, appeared before it. In the shadows. Nonsense. Luciana's certain tree helplessly shake head. If it were an adult Cypher Paul agent teammate, he would likely be very angry right now, and might even consider finding an opportunity to eliminate them directly for disobeying order. But Mumai's age always made him think of his daughter, Khalifa, who is only 3 years old this year. Yo, what a beautiful little girl, are you also a candidate? You look really tasty. The hand demon paid no mind to the severed hand. Instead, it moved its massive, disgusting body, looking at Mumai with surprise. At this time, Tanjiro, awakened from his coma by his deceased younger sister, opened his eyes just as a petite pink figure came into view. You too, I will eat both of you. Suddenly, the hand demon couldn't hold back anymore. The dark yellow arms coated in layers on its body opened their demon hands smeared with red fingernails and shot out rapidly as if propelled by jets. The swishing whistling sound echoed endlessly. Humphrey. Mumai glared at the monster, let out a cold snort with her little nose, and without a word, went to meet it. As she moved at high speed, her figure seemed to float. Her movements were incredibly swift. The Nichiren blade in her palm flashed with a sharp, cold light under the moonlight. The attacking demon hand, like cutting melons and vegetables, sprayed foul blood as they fell to the ground. Although she hadn't received extremely professional swordsmanship training, she possessed basic blade skills. When her swinging speed increased, only a swordsmanship master could discern anything amiss. So amazing Gushaiwan in the forest and Tanjiro behind him were already dumbfounded. Dodged it. Dodged it again. What agile movements, her speed is even faster than that little girl before. The hand demon's focus wasn't on the severed arms. After all, if one is cut off, two can immediately grow back, it just stings a little. What it truly cared about was Mumai's ability to remain completely untouched, like a fluttering pink butterfly, amidst the siege launched by numerous arms from different angles. Even the few hands that wrapped around behind her head were casually dodged with a turn sideways. Hee, you can only cut off my hands or dodge them, but you can't defeat me. Oh! You should know, up until now, no person or demon has been able to injure my neck. The hand demon was very confident in those two tough arms wrapped around its neck. This was a brilliant method it had spent decades thinking of. Even Urakadaki couldn't possibly defeat the current me. Mumai completely ignored its words. She didn't have the habit of spouting nonsense during combat. She quickly stepped on the opponent's extended arms and closed in. Relying on her observation Haki's perception ability with no blind spots, whether it was demon hand attacking from the front, wrapping around to the side or back, or even slender demon hand newly sprouting from the arms along the way, she effortlessly dodged them one by one. Those she couldn't dodge were directly cut off. It was an utterly overwhelming aura. For some reason, the hand demon, who had been full of confidence just moments ago, looking at the expressionless Mumai, felt its pupils subconsciously contract. It actually became nervousness. How is that possible? Such a small girl, where would she have the strength to cut through my arms and neck? Just at this time, Mumai performed a flying leap and flip, dodging the grabs of the demon hand, and flexibly jumped onto the back of the hand demon's head. Her entire body was hanging upside down in midair. From this angle, the latter couldn't see the situation behind it at all, and with its bulky body size, it couldn't turn around in time either. It could only control those arms to chase after her from several directions. But it didn't notice that in Mumai's left hand, a strangely shaped short musket had appeared. Bang! As she pulled the trigger, the gunshot that echoed throughout the entire court rang out. From the gun barrel, the jet bullet from another world, in a flash of gunfire instantly pierced through the tough demon arm, which was like iron and stone, and the neck within it, even shooting out from its throat. How is this possible? The hand demon, covering its neck where blood was spraying, was dumbfounded. Immediately after, intense terror showed in its eyes. Swish, the next second. As the Nichiren blade in Mumai's right hand became a streak of blade light and slashed across its completely defenseless neck, the huge and terrifying head immediately separated from its body, flew into the high altitude, and met Mumai's eyes for just a second. Finally, it landed heavily, and after rolling a few times, stopped in front of Tanjiro. Right next to it was the shattered fox mask. At the same time, its body, which was still standing not far away, began to turn into char along with the head. Damn, my body is gradually collapsing, I can't stop it. Am I finally going to die? The hand demon looked blankly at the mask fragments before its eyes. My strength indeed couldn't cut through your neck, but Ikuma's jet bullet could. Mumai looked proudly at the moon above her head and thought to herself. Chapter 304, The Solution for Aqua Laguna. Seeing Mumai step in to save Tanjiro, Im sighed inwardly, marveling at the truly wondrous fate between protagonist and protagonist. Ever since transmigrating to become the biggest boss of this sea-star world, he had taken a particular interest in these favored children of the worlds, these creatures called protagonists. But who could blame him? He had transmigrated a bit too early, the protagonist of Sea-Star World might not even be a sperm yet at this time. To be honest, Im had a certain fondness for the little girl Mumai, after all, she was quite cute. However, it wasn't to the extent of being infatuated or constantly protecting her. When he saw Mumai pierce the hand demon's neck with a jet bullet and then casually decapitate it with a single swing of her blade, he lost interest in watching further. Because he knew very well there was nothing more to see in the subsequent development. Furthermore, it would take 15 days for a new Nichiren blade to be forged, which was not a short time for the ever-changing Sea-Star World and the world government. Im waved his hand again, summoning Inma from the sword stand nearby. Ever since his first journey through Hell, where he officially broke through his centuries-long hockey limit, he had set a plan. Namely, to spend 10 hours every day cultivating in Hell to improve his soul's strength. Because of this, his life had once again become somewhat solitary. But the feeling of getting stronger little by little every moment was indeed captivating. It was hard to imagine what level his hockey would reach in a year if he kept up the current pace. In terms of combat power alone, he could probably fight 3 highest combat powers simultaneously without losing right now, but that might not be the case in the future. Unless others also found a way to break through their limits, the gap between himself and figures like Garp or Whitebeard would only grow wider. If there were no stargates, no other worlds, then this would naturally be beneficial to his rule over Planet C. However, currently, In order to improve the combat power of the world government entity and face increasingly stronger opponents in the future, he would have to find ways to actively enhance their strength later on. As for what method, he didn't know. After all, there was only one Inma. Besides, first had to ensure his own strength maintained a sufficient safe distance. Swish, the next second, the blade was drawn halfway. As wisps of purple chi overflowed from the blade and then spread from his hand to his entire body, Im's eyes slowly closed. This was the so-called spirit roaming hell. 3 days later, a strong wind picked up, dark clouds gathered, and the oppressive air pressure weighed down on the gloomy Great Sea. Amidst the roaring sea waves, a massive storm was brewing. A colossal white ship, resembling a city, was surrounded by a translucent air layer and slowly floated above the black sea of clouds, pressing it beneath itself. Lord Saint Nerona, we have arrived in the Water 7 Sea area. Stussy, dressed in a black dress, stockings, and high heels, with blonde hair, blue eyes, and fair skin, possessed a figure that was undeniably alluring. Yet, the serious makeup on her face didn't seem out of place at all. Every time Im looked at her, he did feel a sense of aesthetic pleasure, and her overall qualities and abilities were quite outstanding. This was why he liked to keep her by his side. She was an excellent secretary. Im nodded. He had chosen this place as the first stop on his journey through the first half of the Grand Line. Firstly, the city of Water 7 was indeed beautiful. Secondly, he wanted to personally check the research progress of the Sea Train project. Thirdly, he wanted to chat with Shipwright Tom in his capacity as a celestial dragon. However, the technician responsible for monitoring the climate suggests we temporarily refrain from descending, as unfortunately, Water 7 is currently facing the annual Aqua Laguna. After listening to Stussy's report, Im raised an eyebrow, thinking to himself, how lucky, to encounter this just like that. The so-called Aqua Laguna was a super tsunami capable of submerging 2/3 of Water 7's urban area. Because it occurred in the Grand Line, there was no precise or regular timing for its appearance. It was only known through experience that it would definitely happen once a year. Fortunately, it was accompanied by a massive storm. So, the residents would choose to leave by ship in advance or stay in the shelters in the upper district based on the sign of a strong south wind called Kuraku blowing before the massive storm arrived. Of course, this could only guarantee the safety of most people. The damage to the buildings and houses in the lower district was unavoidable, even if they took various sealing and waterproofing measures beforehand. Therefore, every Aqua Laguna filled the entire city's population with nervousness, fear, and helplessness. Have the situation below broadcasted to this saint. Given the circumstances, Im naturally wanted to see just how powerful this thing was. Yes. Stussy bowed respectfully, accepting the order, and turned to leave with an elegant cat-like stride. Soon, a flying warship flew out from within Noah's Ark, then plunged into the dark clouds, passing through them to the air below. At the same time, the real-time footage they filmed amidst the wind and rain appeared on the virtual screen in front of him, and Stussy returned to his side, waiting quietly. In the screen feed, Water 7, on the dim and vast Great Sea, looked like shivering giants being battered by wind and rain under the dark clouds. The increasingly violent sea waves on the sea surface continuously pounded the giants' bodies, making them appear isolated. That white zone is the future Sea Train manufacturing plant, the Sea Train Central Station, and the current Sea Train research base, right? Has its scale already reached this size? Im secretly thought as he observed the position that was roughly the left foot of this giant. He had originally wanted to ask if Tom, Guiram, Iceberg, Frankie, and others had been properly settled, but then he felt that his subordinates should be able to handle such a small matter. The 5 elders were well aware of the value of the Sea Train to the world government, and even to the entire planet Sea. Time was constantly blown away by the howling gale, and the heavy rain covering the giant grew even heavier, but these posed no threat to it. Even if this heavy rain fell for 10 days and 10 nights, with Water 7's nearly perfect drainage facilities, no amount of rainwater could wreak havoc. The key was the tsunami that had already begun to form on the other side of the horizon. Im looked at the sea waves in the screen feed, which were rolling up seawater and rapidly increasing in height at a speed visible to the naked eye, considering whether he should personally intervene and destroy it. Although the scale of this super tsunami would be enough to turn a coastal metropolis into Atlantis in his previous life. But in the canon timeline, even Luffy and Zoro 2 years ago were able to punch a tunnel through the belly of this Aqua Laguna. They helped the tens of meters long sea train pass directly through it, without touching a single drop of seawater the entire time. With his strength, solving it certainly wouldn't take much effort. But Im seemed to fall into hesitation. Even when the Aqua Laguna completely formed and heavily impacted Water 7, he showed no intention of personally taking action. Because he felt that he could at most help them solve it once.